If you need to pop out their phone call and pop back in, that's okay. And the meeting will be recorded. It'll be on the council's YouTube page. Recording started, Robert? Yep. And we'll do the sederant, please, Lynn.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. Can I just double check if members online can hear us okay? I've got a message from Councillor Kyle to say she has no sound. Councillor Kyle, can you hear us okay?
I can hear you, Lynn.
Yeah, I can
Thank
hear
you
you as well, Lynn, no problem.
Yeah.
Thank you. In terms of the sederant members, if you can, when you hear your name, if you can confirm your attendance, please. Councillor Mabin.
Present, thank you.
Councillor Cogley.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Canning.
Present, thanks.
Councillor Richardson.
Yeah.
Councillor Sangster.
Here, thank you.
Councillor Todd.
Yep.
We have an apology this morning from Councillors Lennox and Crawford. Councillor Kyle, I can't see online, so I'll mark her as present. Councillor Watts.
Present, Lynn.
And Councillor Hogg.
Yes, thanks, Lynn, I'm here.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lynn. We'll try and get Councillor Kyle back online. She's got problems, I think. We'd like to welcome Wendy Connolly, who's the head teacher at Shortleys Primary and the Early Childhood Centre, to do a report on the recent school visits she's had and the inspections. Thank you.
Thank you through you, Chair. I'd just also like to extend that welcome to Wendy, and also thank members for the really productive visit that I understand took place to Shortleys. I'll pass to Graham McGinn, Deputy Head of Education for Performance and Assurance, to deliver that report, supported by Wendy in that space. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
In here now, thanks.
Right, so we're going to Graham again, and that's the school inspection at Shortleys. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair, and good morning, members, and thanks also to Wendy for joining us this morning. So the purpose of the report is to share the findings from an inspection by Education Scotland and the Care Inspectorate that took place at Shortleys Primary School and Early Childhood Centre. As a fairly detailed report, I don't plan to go through every single section, but just to highlight a few areas before we go to the areas on the inspection. The recommendations are set out in paragraph 2. That is then followed by a lengthy section on background to inspection. I would like to highlight a few of the paragraphs within that section, starting off at paragraph 7. And in paragraph 7, it details the two different types of inspections that take place. So a full model inspection, which focuses on 4 quality indicators, and a short model inspection, which focuses on 2 quality indicators. The model that was used at Shortleys was the short model inspection. That's the 2 quality indicators, and there's more detail within the paper as we go through. I'd like to highlight paragraph 8, and that's just to detail the quality indicators that are actually evaluated in inspections. They are detailed in paragraph 8 with the full inspections. The four that are involved in the full inspection are detailed there, and the 2 in the short model inspections are detailed. So the 2 that were focused on at Shortleys with learning, teaching and assessment, and raising attainment and achievement. In early years, that's called something slightly different, securing children's progress in early years. So paragraphs 7 and 8. I would like to highlight paragraph 13 also to members, and that is that in some inspections, HMIE are joined by colleagues from the Care Inspectorate, who also provide quality grade evaluations in the Early Childhood Centre. So where the Care Inspectorate inspectors do join in HMIE inspections, then this effectively leads to 2 separate inspections taking place at the same time. So an inspection taking place in the primary school and the Early Childhood Centre by HMIE, and also a separate inspection taking place by the Care Inspectorate in the Early Childhood Centre. So a fairly intense inspection period for the Early Childhood Centre and the school. So lots of detail there around about the processes and systems that take place during the inspection, but I would like to highlight to members the paragraphs 21 to 24. And these paragraphs highlight the East Ayrshire Early Childhood Centre quality and monitoring visits. So these are visits that take place by the central team to early childhood centres to support ongoing improvement. And paragraphs 21 to 24 detail that process for the Early Childhood Centre quality monitoring visits. That's followed on in paragraphs 25 to 27 by detail around about the school quality improvement visits, and that gives full detail. Members will be familiar with that from previous reports. So there's school visits and early childhood centre quality improvement visits that take place. To highlight to members paragraphs 28 and 29, which provide details of the early years visit, quality improvement visit that took place on the 23rd of October 2024, and there was some guidance left for the school around about paragraph 29 in terms of a small number of areas to focus on for continuing to improve. There was a primary school quality improvement visit that took place, and details of that visit are highlighted in paragraphs 31 to 32. And what I would like to highlight is that the guidance that was left for the school to improve and to continue to work on was actioned, but as can be demonstrated by the positive outcome of the HMIE inspection. So into the detail of the actual inspection, and that starts at paragraph 33. And Shortleys Primary School and Early Childhood Centre was inspected in week beginning the 11th of November 24. Inspectors, as I've said, have used the short model inspection, and that involved evaluating the performance of the school and the Early Childhood Centre using the quality indicators as detailed before. They were also joined by the Care Inspectorate, who focused on the quality grades as detailed as before. So to summarise, there was effectively 2 inspections taking place at that time. One by HMIE and one by the Care Inspectorate. The HMIE's findings for the evaluations of the quality indicators are detailed in paragraph 36, and I hope members would agree overwhelmingly positive findings in terms of HMIE's evaluations. They did identify HMIE the number of strengths in the school and early childhood centre, which are identified in paragraph 37. I'll pick out a couple. A very strong sense of teamwork among staff, led ably by the head teacher and senior leaders. Staff developed very positive relationships with children and their families, and I'm sure members who joined us on the visit to the school yesterday, observed those strong relationships. Also to highlight, children are very proud of their school, and across the school and early childhood centre, staff have developed strong approaches to ensuring equity, and again, members would have seen that yesterday during the visit. There were a small number of areas highlighted where continued improvement, and it's important to highlight continued improvement. So they're not asking the school or saying to the school they weren't already doing this. They're asking them to continue to improve, and that is to continue to raise attainment and also to continue to review children's learning spaces, and they're identified in paragraph 38. Paragraph 39 details the Care Inspectorate's gradings for the Early Childhood Centre, and the Care Inspectorate did identify 2 areas for continued improvement, which are detailed in paragraphs 40. So there's 2 areas detailed there. So in response to the inspection, the Care Inspectorate will return just to follow up and monitor the progress of the 2 areas for improvement. HMIE won't return to the school. They are happy with the progress the school is making, and they are confident that the school can continue to improve without further engagement. and that's detailed in paragraph 43. So 44 details that the school would continue to build on the strengths and address the areas for continued improvement. And certainly I hope members had that assurance yesterday during the visit, but certainly we have full confidence in the school to continue to make the improvements that have been identified, but also to continue to improve the school as identified within the school improvement plan. So positive report. I hope members agree. Wendy's here, can share a bit more detail around about the actual inspection process and what that was like. But I hope members agree. A positive report overall. So happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Graham. Linda, would you like to add anything before I go to Wendy?
No, and through you, Chair, thank you very much for that. I think clearly, Chair, the findings of the inspection and identifying that which is already going incredibly well under Wendy's very robust leadership have been well highlighted. And again, the fact that the staff are all onboarded in that respect is really great assurance for us in going forward. And clearly, members, as you'll see coming through the reports, we're seeing a great tie-in to the audits that are taking place, both are the learning visits that we do as a central team, both in the schools and the kind of more audit type approach that we take in the ECCs. So we're really starting to see a lot of these bearing fruit. So I just want to commend again Wendy and the team on this report, and thank members again for taking the time to go and visit as part of this process.
Thank you, Linda. We'll go to you now, Wendy. Mrs. Conley, the head teacher, and give us your insights on how the inspections went.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks for having me here this morning. The inspection process was incredibly intense. The inspection team disengaged at 11:30 on the Wednesday morning, so they had and only arrived at 12 o'clock on Monday. So it was incredibly intense. Although we were a short model inspection, as Graham and Linda have both outlined, it was 2 inspections going on at once because Care Inspectorate were inspecting at the same time as HMIE. So it was an incredibly intense experience. Generally speaking, it was very positive with regards to HMIE because I did feel incredibly supported by the team who came out. They absolutely understood the demographic of the school and the needs of the community within Shortleys, and they listened to all of the information and the evidence that we provided for that. And that did lead, I believe, to us being able to evidence and triangulate all of the evidence that we'd given them initially to show that and demonstrate where we were as in a school and an ECC and on our journey. And we did present that as our journey. We had to talk a little bit about where we had been pre-pandemic, the impact that it had on our learners and our families and our school and our ECC. And we had to then discuss really, because that's what the focus was for them, was that recovery and how we'd got back to where we were now and we were intending to go in the future. And they were incredibly open to listening to that, and certainly did did scrutinise very heavily all of the evidence that they were given and listened very carefully to what we said. So I do feel it was very robust, it was very intense, but I do think it was fair.
Thank you, Mrs. Conley. And we'll go over to questions from Councillor Cogley. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. And well done. I think it can't be understated how challenging having an HMIE and a care inspectorate at the same time must be. And well done, Wendy, you and your team for performing so well and showing the school as it absolutely is. And it was a pleasure to visit yesterday. It really was. Thank you very much. My first visit to your school, as I then remembered yesterday, was almost exactly 5 years ago, along with Jim Todd, when I was initially rolling out my Litter in Schools programme. And I remember talking to all of your children together in a huge assembly, and I made Jim, I think, walk around with bags of dog poo or something or other, something similar. We were demonstrating a particular point, but we were made very welcome then and again yesterday. So thank you so much for that. And just to pick up on one particular point, I think paragraph 37 sums it up, and I think the pointers that are made there, the strong sense of teamwork amongst the staff, and that was absolutely evident yesterday during the course of our visit. And the way you lead your team, everybody interacts so well, and there's such a nice feeling when you walk into a school, and I think that's the thing that you get. As a visitor to a school, it's what does it feel like when I go in? And your school felt lovely, very welcoming, but that right level of interaction between everybody who was there. And the children are clearly very proud of their school, and we were taken on a tour by 4 pupils from year 6 and 7, and they were very, very able in each of their individual presentations to us when they were showing us around and showing us everything that you do. And the children interact well with each other, staff and visitors, and that was absolutely evident in what we saw. We were then each we then each had 10 minutes in 2 different classes, so we were able to see and experience the learning experience that the children have, and we each had various different things which were extremely interesting. And I mean, I was learning about coding, which I was very, very impressed, and I think we all came away greatly uplifted. And it makes it so much more human when we go into a school and actually see what's happening, rather than, you know, just sort of looking at good, satisfactory, good. You actually get a proper feel for what's going on. And well done, Wendy. It was excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we've got Councillor Todd and then Councillor Richardson.
Thanks very much, convener, and thanks. Lovely words, Sally. Absolutely warranted for Shortleys. Can I say everybody, Shortleys get the best Christmas shows. They really are. They're absolutely brilliant. Please go. But I just need some clarification on the rationale, because I don't understand. I can't remember, and it'll be my fault. I accept that. But I can't remember Governance and Scrutiny ever having a magnifying glass over an HMIE report for a primary school. So is this a new policy for the committee where we're going to go to a primary school after an HMIE report? Or is it, I don't understand why we had to get involved at this side. And if it does mean that we're going to go to schools to have a follow-up inspection, I mean, as it says in the report, you've got HMIE and the Care Inspectorate and all of the guys and lasses that are doing their audit visits going through all the year, because it seems to be a lot of visits. I think Linda's going to give me the answer shortly. But I just want, I'm not against it, absolutely not. But I don't understand the rationale. So if it's going to be all the schools, then that's fine. But I don't understand why we had to go after the HMI report. Thank you.
Go to David Mitchell and then Linda, maybe.
Just to confirm that scrutiny as a function isn't an exact science. The committee has flexibility in how it conducts itself. The committee is trying to not just exist on a basis of officers put reports in front of members approve them and we all move on. We have sessions around looking at the training and development needs. We have sessions around where this committee would actually want to shine what we call the spotlight of scrutiny in particular areas of operation, so that the members of this committee have a say in what you look at, rather than just respond to what's put in front of you. So the committee has a bit more flexibility in terms of how it discharges its functions. It's had these reports in the schools for many years in terms of receiving them here. There's been different approaches. We're at a period just now where it's recognised the value in having the head teachers in. And then, as always happens when we bring repeat business back, we try and improve each time. And at some point in the process, it was suggested and discussed amongst the members whether or not it would assist members in their consideration of these reports to visit the schools. It's a bit like planning site visits. The option's there for every application before every planning committee. Some members take that opportunity and recognise it. Some recognise the value but can't go, and some don't see any value and don't go. So there was a discussion in which it was agreed that there would be value in going to the premises. I don't think this school was picked for any particular reason other than it was the next one up. It doesn't mean it has to happen every time, same as the planning site visits, but members themselves, I believe, felt there would be value in having at least the opportunity to visit schools. Some of you will be familiar with some of the schools, so you'll get nothing out of visiting it if you were there the week before for other reasons as a ward member, for instance, but others of you might never have set foot in a particular school. So it's horses for courses. It wasn't about this particular school. It's about this committee exercising its own discretion as to how you discharge your function, rather than just being led led by others or officers and just having a strict diet of reports. So it wasn't particularly about one school, and I think I'm just been advised 4 members turned up. So if in practice the value of this isn't perceived to be as great as was thought, I'm sure you'll all decide not to continue with that practice. But it was for those members to pick up a better understanding of the schools, and it was taken, I think, taking account of the fact that the schools have X numbers of visits and audits and inspections and everything else, and it wasn't intended to add to that pressure. It was intended just, I think, to offer that bit of support and show that bit of interest and allow members to gain a better understanding of what a school actually is. I don't mean what a school is, it's where we teach pupils, but how a particular school's operating, that atmosphere. Councillor Cogley mentioned it. You can read all the reports you like, but you don't get a feel for it till you walk in the door. And I think the committee just recognised, well, let's have that opportunity to walk in the door, and this was the first one where that was applied. So it wasn't particularly about this report or this school, and if members decide in reflection down the line that this isn't a practice they want to continue with, I'm sure you will decide not to, but it came from the committee. It was proposed at the meeting and it was discussed with the committee, and that was the general outcome.
Thank you, David. Go to Linda.
Yeah, thank you through you, Chair, and thanks for the question, Councillor Todd. I think the bottom line is the request made of us to accommodate a visit, we're only too pleased to do so, again with that view of not applying further scrutiny in a report that's already written, but again just to offer members that chance, particularly given there's a lot of new members as well, to have that chance to go in and actually see that lived out, if you like. And it's really important, particularly in the case of potentially short leaves, that context is always understood, you know, given Wendy's particular demographic and numbers there, and a lot of the deprivation in that community, as you already know and support. So I think for us, and just to maybe give a wee bit of reassurance around about our audit processes, we don't think of them as audit, we think of them as learning visits, and we got round all of the schools. So they've all been, I'm not saying done, I hate that word, but they've all been done. That's taken us 2 years. So we're not out there all the time in all the schools, but clearly it's a rolling programme. So Wendy probably not be visited for quite some time now, given that she's had an authority visit, they've had the ECC audit, if you like, and then they've had a full-blown HMIE and a care inspectorate visit. So just to reassure, it's absolutely not intended to be anything about overkill in terms of audit and scrutiny. But what we are seeing, as I mentioned in my preamble, is we're really finding that these audits undertaken by us centrally are not only supportive, you know, to the schooling going forward, but it also helps us identify areas that need picked up if there's any, you know, slippage in that potential area. So just by way of assurance, Councillor Todd, we hope there's not overkill in the space, but it's been a 2-year programme to get round everybody. And what we don't do is we don't wait on the HMIE to fire off the flare and we all go running. It's very much about, we kind of know what the order will be. It's done on a, generally speaking, a time basis. And just to say that we actually know we've got 3 more reports coming to GNS that are full-blown HMIEs over the coming weeks and months, and we clearly wouldn't expect members to be in attendance at all of those schools. But again, really just want to be responsive to the committee's needs in that regard. So I hope that helps to I get the point about overkill in school, nobody able to go on with the job or work because there's never empty and not visiting. So thanks, Councillor Todd. Thanks, Chair.
It's Councillor Cogley, and then I'll come back to Councillor Todd.
Yeah, thank you. And in fact, just by way of reminder, we did one of these visits, I think perhaps 7 or 8 years ago, David, you will probably remember, we held the GNS meeting at St Joseph's Academy. And you were involved in that. So that is the last time we actually hosted the whole meeting within the school, and as part of that, that was the follow-up to the HMIE visit, and it was actually quite useful. And again, I'm sure reiterating the points already made, it's not something that we need to do on a regular basis in terms of the visit to the school, but it is just useful as a reminder for us as a committee, just to see what this is all about. And for that, I think it was very, very constructive. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, convener. No, I'm absolutely open with this. Yeah, absolutely fine. But the invite came, there was no explanation with it. There was no there was no rationale behind the reason for the visit. And that gave me a wee bit of concern, because I thought, HMIE report, why are we going and giving more burden onto the staff? Sorry, you're sitting here, Wendy, and I'm talking about your staff. So I had a wee bit of concern about that, but with the conversation, I'm not against any of this, absolutely. And if it's done for the right reasons, then all councillors should have been invited, not just members of the Governance and Scrutiny, because that'd be a good idea to see different schools and how they work. We have been in that position. We've been very lucky that we have been to a lot of schools, Sally, in our previous roles, but a lot of councillors don't see other schools. Our three councillors in Ward 5 are entirely proud of our 2 primary schools and will always support them. So that was just that wee bit of concern because there wasn't enough description about the visit. And that's why I thought, why are we going here straight after the HMIE report? That's all it was. But I've had a bit of comfort with the conversation. So absolutely, and if it happens in the future, yeah, I'd love to go along. Thank you.
Sorry, Chair, through you, just a couple of points to try and offer further assurance. The actual communication that was sent out to members read at the request of the Chair and Vice Chair and in advance of the committee's consideration of the HMIE inspection for Shortleys Primary School, scheduled for committee on 6th of March, it has been agreed that a site visit to Shortleys Primary School will take place on Wednesday, 5th March. So apologies if that wasn't enough information. And secondly, I would say to any member, if you have any concerns or queries about anything the committee is doing, feel free to ask myself or Lynn and we'll be happy to provide any further insight that's required.
Thank you very much. I think it was very useful to do the visit to the school. My original idea was to get the GNS committee up out of chambers and active and go and visiting a school where an inspection had taken place. And unfortunately for Shortleys, you were next up on the list being inspected. I was hoping it would be a secondary school and we could move the whole GNS committee to that secondary school, do a site visit and then do the GNS committee there. But for IT problems and various reasons, it worked out this way. We did the visit first yesterday and we're back here doing the committee. We've done a primary school. My hopes would be at some point later in the year, maybe we could do a secondary school if a secondary school inspection comes in. I don't know if that would be possible, Linda.
Just as luck would have it, Councillor Mabin, we have 3 making their way to you that are now completed in terms of formal HMIEs, and we have several more in programme, but we do have a secondary inspection recently completed, albeit a slightly different type. So we have 3 completed reports that will be coming to you dependent upon the publication dates, etc. Clearly, they have to go through HMIE and Education Scotland ratification before we can do any formal release to GNS, but the next 3 coming your way are actually Doon, Mauchline and Galston. So we have an academy in process, well completed, and 2 primary schools that have completed in the past 2 weeks. So in fact, all 3 have been in the past 2 weeks.
Yeah, thank you for that. We'll go back to questions about the school visit and the school report. We'll go to Councillor Richardson, then Councillor Sangster. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter. Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I was one of the councillors that tagged along yesterday, and thanks very much to Wendy and the pupils that showed us round. I thought it was a good visit. It was interesting for me to see a primary school in another ward other than the Ward 2, because obviously I'm in the 3 primaries up in Ward 2, parent councils and in and out and what have you. So I know those primary schools quite well. Thought that as has been noted already by Sally, I thought the atmosphere in Shortleys was great. It reminded me very much of Onthink. Really good atmosphere going round. Kids seemed happy and were learning in a great environment. Really liked the primary 6 class, where every single pupil had their own laptop. They were all, it was history, I think. History was the chosen subject. They were all working away in I think it was an old version, maybe the Borough Kilmarnock badge. 2 red squirrels and Confido at the top, and the wee hand, and they were all colouring in and what have you and learning about that. Only disappointment of the day in that history class, I did ask the question of all the wee kiddies, in which year did Kilmarnock win the Scottish Championship when we're champions of Scotland? Now, I've got to say, Wendy, not one kiddie knew the answer. 1965, obviously, which every kid in Kilmarnock should know. It did then become apparent that some were undercover Rangers fans. So this, Wendy's only a suggestion. It's no a diktat from a councillor, but you know you've got those 4 houses and your ward house points. Any kiddie showing Rangers tendencies, I would deduct 5 house points. And then any kiddies that are getting into being Killie fans should be awarded 10 house points. So, but no, it was a great visit.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Councillor Sangster.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I apologise I wasn't able to make the visit yesterday. I would have really loved to have been there. I had to attend a funeral, unfortunately, because I am really passionate about education, and particularly around, you know, young people. I think that and people know about me and what I'm passionate about. And obviously there's a growing neurodiverse community out there. So I'm just wondering, you know, what kind of percentage of pupils, you know, with ESN do you have in your school, and particularly the early learning centre, because I think it's really important to recognise those issues early on and then make sure that these kids are put in, you know, the appropriate placement for primary school. And how do you and your staff kind of go about supporting any child that attends your school with ESN? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster. We've got 30% of the children in the ECC who are on the additional support needs log, and 39% of the school children on the additional support needs log. So it's a third, if you like, approximately across the whole establishment. Every child has their own child's plan. I happen to also be the additional support needs coordinator at Shortleys, not for the early childhood centre, but for the school. One of my deputy managers manages it within the ECC. So all the children have their own individual plans, which are very detailed, and we do follow the procedures that the council have laid out within their standard circular for ESN. But we have also invested a lot of money from our PEF equity funding into supporting groups of children, but also developing a longer term plan for staff round about training. So we've worked closely with our educational psychologists round about neurosequential modelling. We've had a lot of training on ASC and ADHD, and we are, I'm not sure if I'm going to say fortunate or not, sometimes depending on which day I get this particular member of staff, but we do have a member of staff who has ASC in the school, and 2 members of staff who've got identified ADHD. So that really helps us understand what's going on for our children, because they can very clearly call back their experiences of school and nursery and talk to us about that, and that helps us a lot. And we often call on them when we're looking to find solutions to things. We have committed to having support classes for children, so if they are not managing within their mainstream class, they have the option to learn a little bit of the time in the day within a smaller class of 10 children. And that's optional for primary 4s to 7s. There's a class, and then there's a smaller class for the earlier children. We've also developed, we had a little bit of extra space within our school this year, so we gave that over to the ECC, and they use it as a snug, which is what we use for what we call our Wonderful Wednesday programme. And the councillor saw some of that yesterday, that we've given that little space lets even the nursery children come away, because we've got 48 children in our big playroom, and when we went in yesterday it was incredibly busy, even though we were using the outdoor space in the rain. So it's quite nice for some children to be able to go and have that little breakaway space as well. So it's about trying to cater for whatever their needs are and tailor the curriculum and tailor their day so that it suits them best.
Thank you, Wendy. That okay, Councillor Sangster?
Yeah, thank you so much. That is really heartwarming for me personally to hear, and I think for everybody here. You know, so well done, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Councillor Canning.
Thanks, Chair. And thanks, Wendy, for coming today. Just like, it's really for Graham, I think, is more a question around the process, because obviously the reports were different for the care inspector and the education one. Paragraph 21 to 24 describe the more quality monitoring visits. I'm just wondering to what extent, if any, and obviously I don't know the scope of the 2 reviews, but are health and social care involved at all in that process? If that would be appropriate, I don't know.
Yeah. Through you, Chair. At this stage, this is purely focused on education. So at this stage, health and social care are not involved. That's not to say in the future that we couldn't explore that as an option if there's a particular need in an ECC or a school. We wouldn't rule that out, but at this stage, it's purely focused on education.
Thanks. It was obviously just the care inspector, but that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you, Graham, for that reply. Councillor Cogley.
Yes, Wendy, one of the things you mentioned yesterday was that post-COVID, there was a problem with attendance, and you've put a lot of measures in to address this. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about us and what the attendance rates are now like compared with immediately post-COVID, please. Thank you.
So for everyone present, in advance, pre-COVID, Shortleys was averaging about 93% annually attendance. That was fairly static, hadn't moved for very long. When we came back after the pandemic, we dropped to 84%. So that was a really big problem for us. And we've had to concentrate on that and had it on our establishment improvement plan for the last 4 years. So we have a home link worker, which we financed through PEF, and my deputy head teacher is responsible with her remit round about attendance. And obviously we do use the council's policies round about attendance monitoring for pupils, but what we are looking at is creating a supportive package round about families, because at primary school, obviously, if children aren't attending school, it's because the parents are not attending them. It's not because, generally speaking, the children are choosing not to come. So we have developed a number of different things. We took part in a national conference 2 years ago, which my deputy attended, to try and gather ideas from all over the country, not just Scotland, but all over the Great Britain. And we were able to use some of that information. We developed that into something called our 10-day challenge, because research shows if you can break a child's attendance pattern within 10 days, you can actually break it completely and they will start becoming regular attenders. For individual children, we've had a lot of really positive impact from that. We still have a way to go. The last time we looked at our tracking period 2, which was just prior to Christmas, our attendance was sitting at 89%. Our target this year is 91% for the whole school. And then obviously we'll have a climb back up to try and get to where the East Ayrshire average is. So we're still, every percentage is clawed back. My deputy head teacher and home link worker today are actually participating in a conference with another primary school and 3 secondary schools from East Ayrshire as part of a nationwide improvement collaborative programme to try and improve attendance. And we asked to be part of that because we were finding that although every percent, it was just 1% or 2% we were getting up, we need something that's going to have a bit more bite for us. So they're doing that, and that'll be feeding into our school improvement plan for next year.
If I could come back in just before you, David, on that, if you don't mind. So 89%, just in terms of what that actually looks like, I'd be grateful if you could tell me, so for example, in a term, how many days absence, what that looks like. And just also, Linda or Graham, if you could just remind me what our average is for our secondary schools, please. Thank you. And then David, to you.
No, thanks, Councillor Cogley, and through you. Ultimately, when you hit the 89% mark, you're looking at a day off a fortnight. You know, that's the long and short of it. And so many of our schools are using visual aids, etc., to explain that to parents. That literally that's the equation that equates to, around about that piece where your child is effectively missing one day of school in every 10 particular school days. Graham's just pulled up the statistics on where we are just now, and members, before he does that, can I just again, we are in governance and scrutiny, but can I just shine a light? We are in East Ayrshire in a real predicament around about attendance, and I'm not one to shy away from that. So we've had schools in the national tranches. We're in tranche 2. Wendy's just explained that. So Wendy's school was tranche 1 in that national piece to try and look at the issues around attendance, because whilst they could seem to be education, they're also hugely socioeconomic. So ultimately, I've been very clear at Community Planning Partnership in my role as lead officer for economy and skills about all of us seeing this right across the council as our duty to help get young people somewhere. If that's not the school offer, clearly we've diversified in a great way around about the 2 SL offers that we have currently in SL 33 and 66. But ultimately, in terms of census data, which was released, East Ayrshire has one of the poorest attendances in the country at both primary and secondary. So I'm saying that in here in terms of shining the spotlight on ourselves, but at the same time, I hope that what you're hearing is as well that, you know, it's that willingness and the work of our heads working alongside us to try and improve that picture. It has dropped nationally, I do have to say, members. It's not just an East Ayrshire phenomena post-COVID, but ultimately, and it's only by a few percentage points, if you like, not even a full percent. It's about 0.1%, but we are in a really unenviable position in terms of bouncing around that bottom spot. So we take that as a real challenge in terms of working with our families and communities, but we also need the great support right across the council, both on a corporate basis across all of the services, but in your role as elected members. So I put that out there in addition to hopefully provide, you know, further transparency in that space. It's a real issue for us in the council.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Wendy, as well, for the answers. I know your homelink workers are doing very good work. I'll go, Councillor. You want in, Graham, on this? Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It was just to answer Councillor Cogley's question in terms of the percentage attendance just now in terms of secondary schools. As it stands, it's 87%, which is lower than we want it to be. And secondary schools are working hard to improve attendance in similar ways that Wendy's just described in terms of the approaches she takes within her own school. But there is a positive to look at, that we look at this over each month, but we also track it back in terms of comparison with previous years. And that the 87% at this stage is the highest it's been at this stage in terms of the past four years. So at this stage in previous 4 years, it's been lower than it is at this stage. So there are positive signs. You know, it's encouraging that it is improving slightly, but obviously a bit of work to go to make sure it's at the stage that we want it to be at.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Richardson, and then we'll go to Councillor Kyle online.
Thanks for letting me back in, Chair. Thanks, Peter. It was just my first wee input earlier on was a wee bit light-hearted. Pardon me. This is a wee bit more serious, but it's something I seen in the visit yesterday that was really, really kind of heartwarming. I thought in that primary 6 class, Wendy, there was a wee lassie who I think's first language was Arabic, and you were good enough to tell the councillors going round the school about all the different kiddies from different nationalities, refugees, etc. You know, they've had to leave persecution and bombings and whatever, and thank goodness they found their way to a safe home in Scotland. But obviously as a school that must bring its burdens onto yourself and your staff. What I did see was the class teacher took me to the side and showed me an app, and I think they were working on a paragraph, and this app was brilliant. I mean, so that the young lady could join in the lesson in her first language. Basically it converted the whole paragraph, what they were working on, to Arabic, so that she could look onto the work of the class in her first language. I thought that was brilliant. But it's really, to get to my question, Wendy, and everybody knows in this room I preamble a bit before I get to my question. How much of a strain does dealing with all those kiddies from different nationalities and different countries place on your school? And do you think you're sufficiently resourced to deal with it?
So obviously, the demographic we have at Shortleys, having children with English as additional language is a relatively new phenomenon to us in the last 10 years. However, I was a head teacher in Glasgow City Council, and children with English as additional, sometimes it's hard to find in your classrooms in Glasgow children who've got English as a first language. It's part and parcel of being a teacher in Scotland these days. So as you said, David, digital literacy is a tremendous support to us in classrooms. My class teachers are very au fait using that. We've invested a lot in the school, but we've also had a lot of external support for that financially. And we have invested a lot of time in training for the staff as well. It's part of the job. There's an expectation that our staff will keep their own training up to date as well. And although we deliver collegiate training for the whole staff every year, if a member of staff is having a child come into their class with a language that they're not familiar with or haven't had experience with, they would be expected to participate in some training of their own round about that as well. And that's supported by myself and my management team. We do have support from the East Ayrshire support team for children who come in to us. But most importantly, really, we have support from the resettlement team. And they are the people who really do help us settle our families in. And that's when I link in a homelink worker with them as well. So that's been really valuable. So it's about that sort of wraparound package for the whole family. And I hope that answers the question.
No, it definitely does, and it's very, very good to hear.
And I should probably also say we had a little girl last year who was with us and who's now gone on to Grange, who had a hearing impairment and English as a second language. She'd come from Ukraine, but we discovered she was very good at mathematically. So when it came round time to do our SNASs, which are our national assessments in primary 7, we had a little bit of a confusion about how we could actually do this. But I checked with the central team, it's absolutely fine to bring mum in to do the translation of the paper for her with the teacher there. And that little girl got a really good grade,
Brilliant.
really good grade in that. So that was really heartwarming for me and showing that we were doing the right thing.
I think you said yesterday, is it four children at Shortleys currently from the Ukraine?
Yes, we've got 4 Ukrainian
4
children
Ukraine.
just now.
Yeah. Thanks for that answer, Wendy. Cheers.
Thank you, Wendy, and thank you, David, for the question. Got to June Kyle online.
Thanks, Chair. I have to thank Wendy for the great tour yesterday. It was absolutely wonderful to meet all these pupils. They were so proud of their school and they were happy to be there, which is a great thing because some kids don't really want to go to school. It was obviously the pupils really enjoy what's happening in that school, and I must admit, the Early Learning Centre, I loved it. And no, David, I didn't go down the chute. The hut outside for reading, everything about the school, the enthusiasm of the staff, the enthusiasm of these kids, absolutely wonderful. I think everybody's struggling, every school's struggling their attendance now after COVID. But I think most kids want to go to school. I really do. Also, with the language barrier, you said yesterday, sometimes if you have to phone a parent who doesn't speak English, it's really difficult for you. Do you get help with that? Thank you.
To you, Wendy. Thank you, Councillor Kyle.
Yes, Councillor Kyle. As I said, the resettlement team are the team that I would usually go to. I've become a victim of Google Translate, so I don't use that anymore because it doesn't really work. So I do tend to go to the resettlement team if I possibly can, but I do actually find that if you speak to our parents face to face, you can normally find a way of communicating most things. If it's a bit more complex, we would ask the resettlement team to support us with that. And I do work really closely with some of their team who can absolutely help us translate.
Thank you, Wendy. Thank you, Councillor Kyle, for the question. And you were also telling us, Wendy, that the kids pick up English fairly quickly and they end up, in many cases, going back home and helping their parents to learn English and get up to speed quicker, which is wonderful for a primary school kid to be helping their mums and dads that way. It's fantastic. I think there's no more questions. Well, thank you very much for your attendance here this morning, Mrs. Conley, and thank you very much for the visit yesterday. It was wonderful.
Thank you very much, and thanks for taking the time out to come and see us.
Thank you. And we'll move now to the next item on the agenda. That's all right. We're going on to East Ayrshire Performs. First up is Colin Hastings. There's all different chunks. It's broken up into different pieces. So Colin's going to start off and we'll take a pause part of the way through and take some questions. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, Chair. The report presents the Q3 East Ayrshire Performs position for the Council with information determined as at the 31st of December and presented to and approved by Cabinet on the 29th of January. The Q1 report in September last year highlighted a significant potential overspend of almost £20 million if service spend was allowed to continue at existing levels, and as such, to address the position, a number of interventions were put in place, including a freeze on all non-essential vacancies, all non-staff expenditure incurred only on essential business critical basis, and all contracts being tendered or appraised were to be reviewed by services having regard to their continuing need and the availability of resources. At Q2, the anticipated position at the 31st of March reduced to £14.67 million on the assumption of management actions indicated by services. However, further work needed to be continued by services to develop service recovery plans and enable the Chief Financial Officer to coordinate those plans into a consolidated council recovery plan. This recovery plan was presented to Cabinet on the 15th of January and then subsequently to Governance and Scrutiny on the 23rd of January. Cumulatively, service recovery plans for 24-25 total almost £10 million, and the financial position detailed in this report takes allowance for the recovery plan and the recommendations contained in the report, including the allocation of £6.289 million of non-recurring funding to education and the Health and Social Care Partnership to offset the remaining financial pressures while recovery plan action is implemented. Members, I will update you on the revenue section of the main report initially, beginning on page 21, which has a summary position of the main service areas from paragraph 15 of the covering report. The education service is projected to overspend by £2.289 million, down from £7.57 million at Q2 and £8.4 million at Q1. This position includes £4 million of expenditure reduction measures within the service recovery plan approved at Cabinet. There continues to be pressure within additional support for learning costs, with an anticipated £2.4 million overspend this year, as well as significant pressures in relation to primary and secondary absence cover. The Council approved the provision of £2.289 million of non-recurring funding to be provided to education to allow recovery plan proposals in relation to both these areas to be finalised over the coming weeks and months, bringing the anticipated position at the year end to an online position. Across the finance and ICT, governance, people and culture and corporate support services, there is a cumulative underspend of just over £1 million as a result primarily of underspends in employee costs and an over-recovery of income in some areas. Following significant work by services and approval of recovery measures as part of the Q1 East Ayrshire Performance Report, Communities and Economy is currently projected to be broadly online collectively at the year end, an overspend of about £25,000, subject to the continued implementation of measures as anticipated. Overspends are continued to be anticipated within the Housing and Community Service and the Ayrshire Roads Alliance. However, actions taken across all services assisting in redressing the balance. The Health and Social Care Services were projected to overspend by £5.2 million, which predominantly relates to continued pressure within community care and out with placements. Following Cabinet's decision to allocate £4 million of one-off support as part of the Council Recovery Plan, this position was at the time £1.2 million. However, the service remains under significant pressure from demand. This position is based on the actions in both IJB recovery plans presented to the Board in August and December, and included within the Council recovery plan being achieved as advised by management, as well as continued action to contain spend. Within central services, a £350,000 pressure is noted in relation to increased insurance costs this year, which will be supported by one-off funding retained centrally, and pressures continue in relation to the cost of council tax reduction support of about £900,000, which is offset by an anticipated over-recovery of council tax collection income of £600,000. At Q3, the accumulated anticipated council service position at 31st of March is now only £1.1 million over budget. However, with an anticipated over-recovery in budgeted council tax income and a service carry-forward position of about £200,000 approximately, the Q3 projected position is a net overall deficit position for the council of around just £300,000. The significantly improved position shows the impact that measures have had. However, services must continue progressing recovery plan actions at pace to ensure that this anticipated position is maintained. Members, I'll stop at that point and take any questions before moving on to other sections.
Thank you, Colin. Members, it'd be helpful if you're going to ask questions or comments, keep an eye on the page number, the paragraph you're referring to, so we can all follow along exactly what you're asking. Any questions on the covering report or on revenue, page 21 to 28? Councillor Richards.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Peter. Peter, I can't give you the page number because Colin was. I was listening to Colin as he was reading, but I wasn't following I'd lost my track with the paperwork. Colin, see when you mentioned about the ban on recruitment, it's interesting because I was at an on-thank parent council last night and listened to the management team at that parent council meeting, and they were getting bombarded by questions from the parents. It's quite a vibrant parent council, this one. A lot of parents go, and I knew what the answer was, but the head teacher was trying to defend the questions about why certain teachers hadn't been replaced, etc.
Sorry, Councillor Richardson, there's a section coming on people. That's a very good question you've got. Can we wait till we get to the people section?
I know.
And Amanda Law will be doing that.
No, absolutely no issues
And
with that.
she'll give you a great response to that question.
Yeah, absolutely no issues with deferring that
Thank you.
question. Yep.
There's no other questions on revenue and the covering papers. We'll go back to Colin. Thank you. Council Initiatives, Pupil Equity Fund.
Thank you, Chair. The Council Initiatives, page 27, gives further detail and narrative around the Council Initiatives that were approved by Council in February 2024 as part of the budget. They show the allocation provided and the spend that is being incurred in the delivery of the initiatives, with information around half-price school meals, clothing grants to 3 and 4-year-olds, and additional works carried out to roads and pavements. There is no change to the projected spend levels for each initiative for 24-25 from that previously reported at Q2. If I move on to the section on Pupil Equity Fund information begins on page 31 and shows the allocation across our schools and the planned spend against the £4 million Pupil Equity Fund that was allocated by the Scottish Government. We note that expenditure of around £2.3 million has already been incurred, with education colleagues advising that a further £1.4 million of planned spend is anticipated to take place between now and the financial year end. The analysis also shows that some schools plan to carry forward around £359,000 of the PEF funding between April and the end of the academic year in June at this time, and that is ordinarily used to fund the teaching support or staffing support from the period April to June. Moving on to the alternative delivery model section, which begins at page 35 and contains financial analysis of the Ayrshire Roads Alliance and the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust. It notes that ARA is anticipated to end the year overspent by around £1.2 million. The majority of this relates to spend within the local delivery element of South Ayrshire Council due to higher costs in respect of street lighting, electricity, subcontractors and shortfalls in parking income. Within the strategic delivery element of the Alliance, we see an underspend of around £239,000, predominantly due to savings in staff costs. Within the local delivery element of East Ayrshire, we see an overspend of around £443,000 due to shortfalls in roads maintenance income and parking income, along with higher costs for street lighting, electricity, winter maintenance and consultancy costs. Page 36 to 38 contain details of the Ayrshire Roads Alliance capital section and include a range of information around roads maintenance and slip roads, bridge works, and on a number of specific areas of roads capital work. In respect of the East Ayrshire Leisure Trust, we note a planned online position at the year end, similar to the position at Q2, which was around £10,000 underspent. In relation to the Treasury section, information in respect to the Council's Treasury management arrangements are contained on page 40. They show the maturity profile of loan debt and information on our investments. At the time of the report, the Council had outstanding debt of £473 million and notes that new borrowing of £55 million has been taken place since the start of the financial year. It also notes that the Council had around £9 million of funds invested, with the majority of this held with the Royal Bank of Scotland. Chair will maybe perhaps pause once again there to allow any further questions on those sections.
Thank you very much, Colin. We're looking for questions or comments now on Council Initiatives, page 2930, which has got quite a bit in. Extended civic pride and half-price school meals and stuff. Any questions? No comments. Okay, the next part is Pupil Equity Fund. If anyone wants to come in, and Councillor Cogley, Pupil Equity Fund.
Yep, thank you. Thank you very much for that. And Linda, this is probably one for you. I know the balance carried forward from the previous year was 261, and we're looking at carrying forward, 261,000, and we're looking at carrying forward 358,000. Now, I know it's largely out of your control in terms of how that's spent, but so that we can have some assurance that it is going to be used. And we were given some very good examples yesterday in terms of how that had been used in short lease. So if you could perhaps update us on that, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Through you, Chair, and probably Colin as well. So just taking the first instance there, Councillor Cogley, clearly this was a point in time in respect of the period that we're reporting to you here today. So that position has significantly updated. We're very clear with head teachers around about the carry forward piece here and the need to spend this. Clearly one of the biggest issues previously has been that PEF runs on an academic year as opposed to the financial year. So it does always tend to mirror up as somewhat of an issue. So just to absolutely give you that assurance, and indeed for the likes of Wendy Connolly there, PEF was fixed for 4 years. So and PEF is actually aligned, given it's aligned to free school meals, but actually it's an estimation formula that provides that. So the good news for head teachers out there is it hasn't been a fluctuating figure. It's been very much a fixed figure, coming to an end at the end of the governmental term next year. So they've had a great awareness of what's coming to them across those 4 years. And, you know, Wendy herself actually is one of the greatest recipients of PEF. So I think it's absolutely right. There's a spotlight shone on that. It's about £250,000 goes to Shortleys on PEF, as you'll see from some of the allocation monies there. So no, ultimately it's part of a schools improvement plan. It's part of what they're asked to do in terms of submission to me, is look at how they consult with the wider community, and that's right across that community, but how that should be spent to best effect the young people for whom this money is destined. So no, long story short, Councillor Congley, very much around about the piece that this needs to be spent, but spent in a really, really focused way. You know, given the budgetary restrictions that we have, it's clearly upon us all to assist in that direction. So please have my assurance, whilst I can't predict what might be left, or I hope there's no much, but ultimately I don't know whether Colin also wants to come in on that piece. Sorry if I stole your thunder, Colin.
Thank you, Linda. Colin back in, and then we'll go to Councillor Sangster.
Chair. No, it's just to support Linda in exactly what she's saying there. It was kind of a few years ago that the pupil equity funding was sort of kind of given estimated amount on a multi-year basis, which makes a big difference to the schools. Prior to that, the schools were put under particular pressure to order to use that funding, but it was recognised that perhaps the schools weren't being able to actually use the funding in the way that they wanted. So that carry forward, while it's there, is not necessarily an issue of concern, particularly at that level. In previous years, we have seen carry forwards at this stage of significant levels, upwards into the £1 million, etc. So that figure in itself doesn't necessarily give concern beyond anything that we would expect, other than that the schools are managing it as they individually see it as best for them.
Thank you, Colin. Councillor Sangster and then Councillor Richardson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just looking for a wee bit of clarity around PEF funding, because obviously I'm new to all this, so I do apologise. I'm just wondering, with regards to PEF funding, is it based on the need of the school, or is it based on the pupil role? So if you've got a school where the pupil role increases quite dramatically, or it drops dramatically, does that change the PEF funding at all? As I say, apologies, I'm new to this, so I'm just looking for a wee bit of clarity.
No, you're absolutely fine, Councillor Sangster. I think it's great that these questions are asked. They demonstrate member interest in the process. So ultimately, I think we're Fran and Anna again on this one in terms of the answer. So the PEF is fixed at 1,200. Per pupil, if you like, and the number of pupils per school is then determined by an estimate that uses the Healthy Living Survey, and that would have told us so clearly as a council you've already committed to free school meals right across the piece. So clearly that would present a problem if a young person hadn't registered, and that would then mean that the school wouldn't get their PEF, for example. So it's based on the Healthy Living Survey. I believe it's based on a number of years of the Healthy Living Survey census that takes the percentage of young people in each school and each authority that were registered historically for preschool meals, and it then regresses that into the future, if you like, to try and predict. So it gives you a £1,200. And what they've done, Councillor Sangster, is they moved around the authorities that they based it on. So to make sure that the estimates weren't poor, they actually focused attention on, I think, 3 authorities. They focused on Glasgow, they focused on Inverclyde, and they also focused on South Ayrshire. So that's a bit of a potted history on that one. So it's actually based, it goes all the way back to 2014 and I think 2018-19. I don't know if that's where you were going, Colin, but I'll clearly, again, I hope I've not stolen your thunder, but it's a premium, if you like, per pupil, but it's based on a best estimate of percentages such that that money could be fixed for those 4 years that it's fixed for.
Thank you, Linda, for that explanation, and Colin's nodding. She did a very good explanation. Yes, thank you. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Look, it's really following on from Councillor Sangster's question then, because I've heard in conversations about PEFs coming to an end, and this more explains that the way the PEF is calculated per individual school is coming to the end at a 4-year period. So PEF's definitely going to continue, but is that right? PEF's continuing after the 4-year period? And if it is the way the PEF calculated going to change?
So the operational guidance that we're working to just now, Councillor Richardson, is 2023. At the moment, clearly we're in a SAC piece as well. So there's something around here about Attainment Scotland funding. So ultimately, you'll remember we were a SAC authority previously, and that then moved to Attainment Scotland funding that all 32 local authorities benefited from, as opposed to just the 9 authorities that were SAC recipients.
Right.
I might hand to Colin in respect of the further funding space there. I haven't been made aware of any change to calculation, because clearly we're in the midst of that 4-year period, which will come to an end on governmental term. So I suppose there is an aspect here about what it looks like on the other side of the governmental term. In terms of elections, but I'm going to go to Colin at that point, because that's me definitely out of my comfort zone.
Okay.
No, through you, Chair, and I'm just going to be tagging onto the back of what Linda's picking up near the end. The Pupil Equity Funding is obviously a Scottish Government initiative, so it continues through to, as I would understand, the end of the Parliament. Whether that then continues forward will then be subject to whatever the outcome of the Parliament and that,
Right, so
as funding tends to be at that point in time. So it's just to sort of kind of reiterate that point, that we're not aware of any changes in the interim in terms of that period for the Pupil Equity Funding, but as Linda says, there is obviously quite a bit of movement in terms of that attainment funding, in terms of the Attainment Scotland and funding that's there. But what we would add in it is obviously coming from a Scottish Government initiative, so the continuation of it is subject to them.
Thanks, Colin. No, that explains it. Because as I say, I've picked up in conversations between head teachers and parents in the main about PEF might be coming to an end, etc. I hope it doesn't. I hope the Scottish Government keeps it going, because for me, given the heads, the management teams within schools, access to that funding that they can use as they see fit. I mean, nobody knows better what the school needs than the management team in that school. So I think PEF's a great idea. So I would be disappointed if it does come to an end. So I hope they keep it going, no matter how it's calculated. Okay, thanks, guys. That explains it.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson, and Linda and Colin for the replies. The next bit that Colin did was alternative delivery models, page 34 to 38. There's quite a bit on that about Ayrshire Roads Alliance and their funding and their projects. Any comments or questions on that? Councillor Cogley.
Thank you, Chair. And David, I think this is one for you. The new Cumnock flood scheme, there was some litigation, I think, outstanding following on from that. Are we clear of that, or is that still ongoing?
No, and we won't be technically and officially clear for 3 years from around last October. The final certificate was issued in terms of the contract, in terms of the final payment. That concluded all contractual formalities, and that opened a three-year window. I won't go into the legal reasons, but the legal context is that company would have 3 years now to determine whether or not to bring a claim. So unfortunately, we won't be technically out the woods for the remaining period of that. So it's got about 2.5 years to run, and there's been no indication. And I really wouldn't say much more than that than an open session. So I'm happy to pick that up out with, but that's the best advice I can give. There is a 3-year window, and we're only 6 months into that, and we just need to wait and see what happens, I'm afraid. But appropriate provision's been made, and it will be dealt with in the year-end accounts, and you'll hear from that in the external auditors as a potential gain of liability. So it will be dealt with properly in accounting terms, even though there is no certainty as to whether a claim will be made or for what a value, or what, more importantly, what the outcome will be.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
No other questions on that and alternative delivery models? Anything on Treasury, page 40 of the report? How we do our investment? No questions? Okay, we'll go back to Colin for the next part of your report, and it jumps a few pages on.
Thank you, Chair. If I can just ask members to maybe sort of kind of move on a few sections, and I can briefly ask them to move to page 57 and the section on business briefings, complaints and risks. So business briefings, members, begins on page 58 and contains a number of performance indicators that services wish to draw to your attention. Within Chief Executives, information relating to benefits processing, planning applications and building warrants are noted, all above target with one exception. And specific narrative includes this period in relation to the achievement of curriculum for excellence levels for 23-24. Within communities and economy, information relating to tenancy, sustainability, void rent loss, housing rent arrears and bridge inspections is noted, amongst others, with only 3 noted as beyond target. And with wellbeing, a number of indicators are noted in relation to delayed discharge and out with placements. Complaints begins on page 65. We note 29 complaints were received within the period and 7 were carried forward from Q2. The improvement actions are as noted at the foot of the page, and the time taken to respond to complaints is contained in the graph on page 66. Members, the corporate risk register begins on page 67. No new risks have been added to the register, nor have any risks changed their status at this time. The risk register was considered and reviewed by the council management team on the 22nd of January. Chair, I'm happy to end there and take any questions before passing across to colleagues for the capital, people and health and safety sections.
Thank you very much, Colin. Do we have any questions, comments, business briefings, page 57 to 63? Councillor Todd.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Convener. And it's just, I didn't know what section to ask you this, Colin, but it's the, are we any indication yet of the level of burden with the national insurance increase contributions for our partner agencies or our business partners that we conduct business with in terms of buying services? I know you have been very, very busy with trying to get what it costs to the council, but I think it's going to be quite vague in terms of where the burden of paying that national insurance increase falls to. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. We obviously we don't have any specific figures in relation to the impact in relation to the business sector or our partners, other than obviously we've sort of kind of as part of the budget press shown the significant impact that it has to ourselves, and that it will have similar impact to our partners as well. And the only kind of example that I can sort of kind of give is in relation to potentially our health and social care partnership, and again, this is just sort of kind of broad estimations without any sort of kind of real support, just as we're continuing to look at things, that in relation to a number of our partner providers, the cost to the council in terms of that could be anywhere between an additional £5 to £10 million. It is significant. So obviously, if you translate that into other services, including roads or any contractors that we buy from, that makes a difference. Obviously then has a similar impact on the business community in terms of their employment of staff and their continuation and be able to do that. But I don't have any specific figures or anything like that specifically.
Thank you, Colin, for that reply. Councillor Richardson.
Thanks, Chair. Just following on from Councillor Todd's question, Colin, do we have any processes set up to, how can I put this? Say we've got a subcontractor, a large subcontractor that we maybe rely on for a large percentage of the service offering and the packages for the people coming out of hospital or what have you, and that subcontractor unfortunately goes down because they cannot, into their business model, build in the employer's national insurance increase. So unfortunately, they just go out the game. So that's obviously we're looking at, having to continue to supply those packages. What are we putting any planning, any emergency planning in place so that we can quickly either replace that subcontractor with another subcontractor, or Well, we have to look at employing more staff ourselves. My question really is, if something like that happens to a big subcontractor, how quickly are we going able to react to that?
I think that would probably, in terms of the contingency planning, that's probably one better for colleagues in the Health and Social Care Partnership, because they'll know what their contingency plans are. Obviously, what we're presumably talking about, and I don't know the extent to which we do contract out, it won't be a question of subcontractors, because obviously legally we contract with our contractors contract with the subcontractors, and we have no contractual arrangement with subcontractors. So if a subcontractor goes out, we still look to the contractor who's subcontracted to them to fulfil the contract. So I'm not being funny, but it's not about subcontractors. If we contract out, then we have to obviously go through the tender process. Generally, activity in the health and social care regime, its space is subject to what they call the lighter touch regimes. You've got a wee bit more flexibility. But once you've made a decision to go out and tender, then that's part of the decision-making process. If you decide to provide something externally rather than internally, then the advantage of internal is, as long as you've got a workforce, you know you've got security of provision. If you go outside because it's deemed to perhaps be cheaper or better value, and I'm just talking generally, no particular care pack, if you go out, then the plus side is you transfer a lot of the risk to the contractor. The downside is if they buckle under that risk, you get no contractor. It would depend on the particular circumstances what the contract is and when it was let, because one option, and it will depend exactly what happens to that company, because there's different forms of insolvency. So if they go into administration, that's the form where they're least damaged, and the greatest hope is that in an administration, either someone will buy the company and trade out, in which case it wouldn't affect your contract. Somebody else would come in and own that company, pay the debts off and carry on trading. So there's one possible outcome where you would carry on. If it's liquidation, then the liquidator has to make a decision whether to perform a contract as the liquidator or whether to terminate it. And insolvency of one of the parties is a ground of termination. It's automatic. So you would then have to have that period where you talk to the liquidator as to whether or what is their intention, how bad's the financial position, how great's the debt, how many creditors, how many assets, and are you going to be able to sell this as a going concern, or is it just going to be sell the assets, or is there nothing to sell in some cases, depending on the. So you have to go through all of that. So there's always going to be a period where the dust settles when somebody goes into insolvency, and you see what form it takes and what the likelihood is of whether they're going to trade. But if there's any doubt at all, and in most cases, 99% of them probably, once they go into that process, they don't get out. So you're really planning on if this can survive, fine, but let's start looking. Options would be, depending when you're awarded, to go to the next company, the second place, and say on a short-term emergency basis, can you fill in? Because they need to comply with procurement rules, takes account of the fact it's an emergency situation. You had a supplier on the Monday, you didn't have them on the Tuesday. You need to make arrangements. In the short term, you would look to other providers to take them, and you would put a temporary arrangement in place until such time as the dust is settled and you know if you've still got your main contractor or whether you're going to have to now, over the piece, do a further tender. But during that further tender, folk aren't sitting out their packages. You will have allocated them to any other business in the market that's got any capacity at that time. So the contingency planning is a separate piece from managing the contract, but the contingency planning needs to obviously take account of the potential scenario where you do lose that contractor, and the only solution is to go to the rest remaining in the market and see if they can provide what support they can until such time as you can put a new tender out, which takes time.
And it's probably going to be at an increased cost, David.
It depends. I mean, it depends what you tender. I'm not being funny. It depends what you tender for. You've got to remember in the care, I mean, we've got to watch for generalisations, because cost isn't actually, or charging isn't the big issue, because a lot of the care contracts, the charge is a charge because it's set nationally. So it's about the ability of that company to live off that and live within their means, and one might fail and the next one will. But actually, a lot of these, in terms of the hourly rates set nationally, and what you actually evaluate and award contracts on is the quality element of how they'll provide the service, because the financial evaluation is neutral because everybody's actually getting paid the same. So it wouldn't necessarily be the case depending on what the contract was for, but do contractual prices normally just go up in life? Yes, generally. But as I say, there is a nationally agreed rate, so there's a slight quirk with the care sector arrangements.
Thank you, David, and thank you, Councillor Richardson, for the question. Right, where are we? Any other questions on this part of the reports? It's business briefings. I'm glad to see that we're using the red, amber, green, which helps us with inspections and scrutinising. And there's lots of green boxes on that one. Communities and economy is looking really good. Percentage of new tenancies sustained is up. Percentage of rent due lost is went down. So we're doing really well. Lots of green boxes on there for us to scrutinise in our papers. Any questions on the next part, which was complaints, page 65 and 66? No questions. And risks is page 67. Any questions? Nothing online. The corporate risk register, page 68 to 82. Any comments or questions on that for call? Not everyone's happy. We're now going back the way a wee bit to the next part, and we're still in East Ayrshire Performs, looking at the capital programme, which is page 41 to 45 on your report, and we go to Simon Bell for that. Thank you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Good morning, members. As Colin noted earlier on, this East Ayrshire Performs report was presented to Cabinet on the 29th of January. However, more recently, the annual capital programme update report was presented to Cabinet and Council, providing more detailed information. The reports note the ongoing pressures on affordability due to construction inflation and the cost of borrowing, and projects continue to be closely monitored to ensure essential scopes aligned with affordability caps. As usual, I won't go into the report in great detail, but I'll highlight some key points for a selection of projects, starting with completed projects. The final two phases of homes at the SHIP programme development at Kennedy Drive in Kilmarnock were handed over in January, and the final phase of works at Kilmarnock Bus Station was completed in February. There's approximately £10 million of construction contracts currently on site, including the St Sophia's Primary School Enerfit refurbishment and the Galston Library projects, which are progressing well. However, with both projects, there's unfortunately been the need to undertake additional works, which is not unexpected given the nature of the two projects, and it's anticipated that both will complete in June. Projects at detailed design stage include Palace Theatre as part of Cultural Kilmarnock, which obtained planning and listed building consent in December. We've also recently received confirmation from UK Government to an extension to the Levelling Up funding deadline to March 2027. Tenders for Phase 1 external fabric works have been received and are currently being assessed, and a further update will be provided to Cabinet in the coming weeks once this tender assessment exercise has been concluded. At Kilmores Primary School, technical designs are being completed to replace the existing dining hall and kitchen, and works are planned to start in the summer. And at Stuart Academy, design proposals for the new extension aligned with the revised school role projections have now been completed, and it's expected that tenders will be issued over the summer. Projects at the earlier stage of development include the Ayrshire Engineering Park and Ayrshire Manufacturing Investment Corridor, where outline planning consent was granted in December. The tendering process for Phase 1 infrastructure works has commenced, and we anticipate a start on site for this project again in the summer. With the Doon Valley Community Campus, following completion and assessment of a range of surveys, Cabinet recently approved an additional £8.5 million of funding for the project. A programme of works will now start to be prepared, and further consultation with key stakeholders is underway. So thanks, Chair. Happy to answer any questions on these or any other projects in the report.
Thank you very much, Simon. We'll go to Councillor Cogley.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you very much, and just really thank you for the update as far as since Sophia's Primary School is concerned. Are we confident that the children will be going back to their new school in the autumn term? So that's my question in relation to that one. Galston Town Chambers, again, we're looking at the end of June. The community, and I know this isn't necessarily on the most important thing on your list, but they're looking at taking over the old library building, which is interlinked obviously with the library moving into Galston Town Chambers. At what stage are we likely to have some dates so that they can start planning for that? And then my third question is in relation to the River Irvine, and the bank stabilisation. Now, I remember when we were doing some bank stabilisation work further upriver between Galston and Newmilns, and it was lengthy and very, very expensive. So when I see that written down there, my alarm bells are sort of ringing quite loud. And I wonder if you could just give us a tiny update on what's likely to be happening there, please. So that's the three things. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Through you, Chair. Since the fires, yes, confident that the pupils will be returning after the summer break. We're saying potentially a June completion, might actually be a wee bit earlier, but the pupils are well settled where they are just now, and it's been agreed in conjunction with education that yeah, they're better to stay rather than come back before the end of the term if that was an option. But confident that it will be completed to have them back for the start of the new term. In terms of the CAT transfer of the former library in Galston, I would need to get some advice from colleagues and come back to you on that one, Councillor Cogley, because I'm not close to that. But in terms of progress with the former Chambers building, yes, we're confident that June is the completion date for that project, and not had any kind of indications to the contrary. The bank stabilisation works at the Ayrshire Athletics Arena. It's a complex job. Very detailed designs need to be undertaken. So we've been working closely with consultants that specialise in this to get the optimum solution in terms of addressing the problem and the costs associated with that. There's a lot of challenges around about working with SEPA, the Rivers Trust, other statutory bodies in terms of when we can actually undertake the work. So we do think it's probably going to be the summer of next year before we actually can commence that. But in the interim, there's monitoring in place just to check of any movement, and that's giving us comfort that there's nothing significant happening in the interim. So it is progressing, and we can come back to you with more details around about what those proposals will be like as they emerge.
Thank you, Simon. And back in, Councillor Cogley.
Yeah, thank you very much for all three of those updates. And in relation to the river, I seem to recollect that there were all sorts of problems that were introduced in terms of the very limited time span that we have when we can actually do the works, because of there were invasive species of plants that had to be accommodated, nesting for birds and so on. So there were all sorts of stuff that that really did make the project quite difficult, and that was further upriver where the river is smaller. So I can only imagine the headaches that you're getting with this one, plus dealing with SEPA. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Councillor Richardson, then Councillor Sangster.
Thanks, Chair. Simon, it's just really a request rather than a question. Myself, Councillors Cowan and now Councillors Barton in Ward 2 are getting asked all sorts of questions at parent councils. And it's just really, see when drawings are available for the changes to Hillhead, Mount Carmel and Unthank. Are your team able to come out to the likes of parent councils and present to parents directly as to what the refurbishments are going to look like? And would that be possible to speak to the three of us just to arrange that type of thing?
Yeah, through you, Chair, absolutely. We've spoken about these projects at other meetings. They are a wee bit further down the line in terms of expenditure in the capital programme, so we're not quite at that stage yet. But as with all our education projects, when we start to develop the scope, that's first done in conjunction with the school and our education colleagues. And then as that starts to take a little bit of shape, absolutely we engage with parent councils and other key stakeholders to have everyone as part of that journey. So yeah, committed to do that with these projects as when we get to that stage.
Brilliant. Thanks very much, Simon.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson and Simon, for the reply. Councillor Sangster, and then we'll go online to Councillor Hogg.
Thank you, Chair. It's just around the demolition of the multi-storey car park. How confident are we that that's going to be completed by April 25?
So through you, Chair, there was actually an elected member briefing note was issued earlier this week. I would hope you would have got it. I think I had the updated elected member list, but it's noting that there has been delays to that project for a number of reasons. There was additional asbestos uncovered, which hadn't been anticipated, which took more time to remove. And the demolition contractor has also switched to a different demolition methodology, which reduces risks and it reduces disruption to the local traders. So we're actually looking at a June completion for that project now.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster and Simon, for the reply. If there's nothing else on capital programmes? Oh, Councillor Hogg, sorry. Councillor Hogg online.
Thanks, Chair. I'll let you away with that one. Thank you very much. Simon, I understand difficulties, obviously, with the cost of everything rising, etc. And I'm just going to ask about the Doon Valley campus, because obviously that has changed quite significantly over time. Now we're seeing great improvements within the school itself. The attainment in teaching is really taken on board a real upward swing. So I'm really quite keen to ask a question about when we really think that the subject of consultation engagement for the REBA Stage 2 will be completed, and when we might see some work starting down in the Doon Valley to upgrade the school to a really good standard. Thanks, Simon.
Yeah, thanks through you, Chair. So consultation with the stakeholders, that's already commenced. We've been out to various groups before Christmas. I've actually got a meeting with the Dunmellington Community Council tonight to talk about this project and others. So that process has started. Since we got approval for the funding last week at Council and Cabinet, the next step is to start to look at a detailed programme for the works. So I couldn't tell you when REBA Stage 2 would be completed at this stage, because we've still got to develop that programme. We are conscious that we want to start works on site as quickly as possible. So we're looking at opportunities to maybe commence some enabling works, if that's possible, later this year to some of the existing areas within the school. In terms of moving forward with the extension to the academy, you'll appreciate that it takes time to develop designs for a new build project and a range of statutory consents and tendering, etc. So, you know, that process will take some time, and it will be summer, autumn next year before we would probably be able to start with construction of a new extension. But as I say, we're trying to look at opportunities to get on site this year and start some enabling works. But that programme is just starting to be developed now, and certainly we can share it with members once it's at a wee bit more detailed stage. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Simon. Appreciate your response. And as I think we all know, it's been quite difficult with the school in Doon Valley Academy being changed from a new build to what we're having now. So appreciate the update. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hogg. And I didn't miss you deliberate. Lynn's sitting beside me here and she nudges my elbow if I miss a hand going up. So I'm not allowed to miss anyone. Thank you, Simon, for the replies. I'm also thinking of doing academy, and there's a school inspection due. I think later on in the year, probably after summer holidays, it might be valuable to organise a visit there. And I would probably invite all councillors so they can get eyes on exactly what we're talking about with the future of Doon Academy and how the inspection went.
Thanks, Chair. More than happy to accommodate that through discussions with my colleagues in FPM as always. So we'll take that. We've got a learning estate management group coming up and we'll take that forward. But obviously it could be still a couple of weeks or months before you see the Doon inspection piece come through following the ratification procedures we discussed earlier on in the other piece, but we'd be delighted to accommodate the members up and Doon.
Thank you very much. Probably the second half of the year then, later on. Yeah, thank you. We'll go to the next bit if there's no other questions on that section. We're going to the people section, page 46 to 53. We'll go to Amanda Lowe.
Thanks, Chair, and morning members. As Councillor Mabins just said, the people pages start on page 46 with the absence statistics starting on page 47. For this period, there were 3,232 incidents of absence. which is a decrease from the same period last year. However, noting that there was more work days lost and therefore ends up in an increase in the same period last year. The top 5 reasons for absence are detailed for period 23-24 and 24-25, noting that the top 4 have remained the same, but in this year, stress work-related has creeped into the 5th position rather than colds, flus and UTRs. The short-term absence compared to the same period last year has increased by equivalent of 0.83 work days lost, and the long-term absence for the same period as last year has decreased by equivalent of 3.01 days. Just note again that tables 2 and 3 do not always compare with the figures that's in table 1, as you may have employees who are off on multiple occasions. Occupational health activity is detailed in page 48. There is a decrease in last year, and members will remember that I've previously advised this was due to the transition to our new provider, which is now up and running, and pleased to say that we have a really positive relationship, and they're being proactive in supporting us in how we can reduce our absence levels to get people back to work sooner. There's also a decrease there because we previously had our early interventions were directly from Optima, and we've brought that in-house with the support and attendance and wellbeing team in a pilot for early intervention from the 1st of January. And I can advise that from the 1st of January to now, we have had 142 cases at early intervention, with 51 of them returned to work. We are seeing an increase in the compliance with the completing of the workplace action plan by employees, and the interaction and the feedback in the main is positive for the individual employees. We've had quite a few thank yous and supports of people that's returned to work saying that if they hadn't had the intervention, they wouldn't have. We're also having some negative contact as well, as you would expect. So we continue to work our way through that. Just also note in there, linked to the support and attendance and wellbeing team and the wider work of the HR team, from periods 1 to period 9 this year, there were 19 employees left the council due to ill health retirement, and 13 on the grounds of capability due to ill health as well. The disciplinary and grievance activities on page 48 and 49. On page 49, you'll also note the headcount across the council, which has decreased from the same period last year by 107, and noting that in the last quarter it decreased by 95 of those. Page 50, members will see the breakdown of the Jobs and Training Fund, and as previously advised, the request has been shared with Council Management Team for proposals for Phase 2, and now that funding has been approved by Council, these will be considered in the near future. Also in page 50 is the recruitment summary, noting that there is an increase in this quarter for the previous quarter, but it's also worth noting that there had been a decrease in the previous quarter, 180, so balancing it out. A lot of these swings are due to there had been the freeze with early years, and then once the Best Value Service Review was completed, then these posts were released, but also there was a spike in the last quarter due to this timing of the academic school year for both early years and for education posts for teachers to have them in post for August. And obviously Councillor Richards will come in with his question at the end, but just to think that there's not a complete ban on recruitment, and you'll see that for the activity that's happening. There is increased scrutiny, both at service department, service levels, the Workforce Review Group, which is chaired by myself, accompanied by the 2 Deputy Chief Execs, Joe McLaughlin and Ailey Mackay, and we further scrutinise the posts, and we only release the posts that are deemed to be essential for going forward for recruitment. There are also times where posts may come forward as permanent, but given the current situation, we may approve them to be temporary rather than permanent. Page 51 shows the number of employees leaving the council in the period, and I would just note there that the 18 other, we're going to change the categories going forward because 12 out of those 18 are people coming to the end of a temporary contract, so we'll add that in as a separate category going forward. The payroll activity, communications activity and OD activity are there for your information and interest, and I'll pause there and happy to take any questions, Chair.
Councillor Richardson and then Councillor Cogley. Thank you.
Thanks very much for that. I think most of this question was probably answered there, but it was just when we as councillors go to parent council meetings, we're there to basically just watch what's going on, and we do pick up really sort of vital information, mainly between the conversations that happen between the parents and the head teachers and the management of the schools. You get a kind of feel for what's happening at the coalface. And basically last night, the head teacher in question was getting a wee bit of a hard time from the parents because it seemed to take quite a while to replace. I think it was 5 posts throughout the school at different levels. But these were posts that people had gained promotion, went to another school, so they were existing posts. But the head teacher, and I think this is what you answered there, the head teacher, although they were existing posts, the head teacher in our application to HR, if you like, was having to make a really strong case as to why these posts should be filled. And that was the bit that I wasn't really following, because I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, if these are known to be vital posts, which they obviously are, because the parents are picking up, the parents are picking up on the fact that there's no people in these posts, and they're then coming to the head teacher of the school and saying, why is this taking so long? But the head teacher in turn having to come, to the further levels higher up the tree to make a really strong case as to why these posts should be filled again. And it just seemed to be the parents are picking up on the fact that it's taking longer to fill. That's where I'm coming from. Seems to be taking a wee bit longer to fill the posts.
Thank you, Councillor Richardson. Amanda?
So there may well be slight delays due to the higher levels of scrutiny, but the teaching posts are no different to any other post in the council. So like a community care officer, etc. as well, they have to come there. We meet every 4 weeks. So there's no any significant delay. There is sometimes delays in some of the services putting in their RAF forms. They do need to put forward a business case, and that business case would normally determine it's not something that we routinely would reject post for education. The majority of them, if not, them all go through. There is some scrutiny, as I say, in the services before it comes to ourselves. So whilst maybe a head teacher thinks every post is essential, or parents do, there might be other ways of working it. And also we might have other employees who are in redeployment situations and things like that as well that we need to consider. We are, in addition, we're looking at the format of the workforce review group, because although we are slowing down the vacancies, we have got a considerable amount coming in front of us every 4 weeks. So we're looking at how we can do that differently. And one example of that will be the schools are run, as you know, in an academic year. So we have already put in place a special WRG that will only look at education posts and early years posts to look at what's the core posts within the staff and establishment and agree what they are for the year going forward, and then look at how we can progress them without having to go through all the administration each time.
Thank you, Amanda. Is that okay, Councillor Richardson?
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Linda, would you want to come in on this education?
No, just very briefly, Councillor Richardson, just to offer reassurance. We've been working with the heads for some time in complement with our colleagues in People and Culture, so they are well aware of the need to submit a briefing around about, and they're supported to do that, so that it doesn't become an onerous task. So it really is just about the schools understanding that the teaching roles and other roles within the schools are set along the other roles of the council, because I think there is potentially a wee bit of skew in regards to when and how these posts can be filled. So they are being heavily supported by the central team in that space, and indeed our colleagues in People and Culture, in making sure that that's not something that plays out to the detriment. So really just to support Amanda's contribution in that space.
Thank you, Linda. We'll go to Councillor Cogley and then Councillor Sangster.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Amanda, thank you very much for your presentation. I have 2 questions. One relates to absence and the other to young people, well, the age profile of our organisation. In relation to absence, on page 47, under key points, it says there have been 2518 days taken for special leave. And on the chart below, we can see bereavement and the figures there. Is my basic question is that the same thing as bereavement special leave? And I also think, Amanda, it might be useful if you just gave us a brief summary of the work that your department is doing, because I think it's absolutely fantastic in relation to trying to address absence, and with specific reference to Andrew Kennedy's department, because I know you've been working very, very closely with his department. And sorry, I'm rambling a bit here. And my final point is in relation to the age profile of our workforce. I'm delighted to see the number of apprentices that we have, and that I think is on page 50. And graduate interns, so that's 116 apprentices and graduate interns. But more generally, in relation to the age profile of our organisation, because I think one of the things that we do tend to see as elected members is a lot of older people doing some of the outdoor amenities type jobs. And to me, I feel we need to be bringing a lot more younger people in to start replacing those people who will inevitably be retiring in due course. So thanks, Amanda. Sorry, that was a bit of a hodgepodge.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. Amanda?
Thank you. So first, in relation to special leave days, yes, that 2518, and that's for nine months of the year. It's not just for 1 month of the 3, that's for the 9 months. So on average, about 279 days a year does include bereavement leave, but it's not only bereavement leave. It includes bereavement leave, leave for dependents, election duties, jury and witness duties, medical treatment, trade union duties, volunteer days, and then unauthorised absence as well. And just for interest, members will see next week the special leave policy is going up to Cabinet for review, but it is only because of a legislation change. But we have scheduled it for a full review for later in the year. But this legislation change comes in the 6th of April, so we don't have time to do a full review. So we're going to do a deep dive into that and see if there's any areas for change for that. In relation to the team, so as colleagues know, for the sport cabinet, we got approval for additional funding for a short-term team to help the services. The early intervention stuff, and so they will concentrate mainly on stress absence, and that's all elements of stress absence, whether that's personal, work-related, or personal and work-related. They started the early intervention that I mentioned the statistics for there, which, as I say, they were starting to make good inroads, and they're supporting services with these difficult cases. In addition to that, for the independent review panel that we'd set up the year before, where we take complex cases forward, services present them with the support of an HR business partner, and that meeting is chaired by myself. Or if it's a case that looks as if it's likely to go to dismissal, Donna Nielsen, one of my managers, chairs that, and I remove myself so that it leaves me clean to be able to support elected members should there be any appeals if there's a dismissal. The chief executive's on that, Craig Young for legal's on it, and managers from my service, where we scrutinise the individual cases and we support managers to give them either the confidence to move forward to the next stage, or to ask them to go back and do a bit more work, so that if it does get to dismissal, we're confident that all areas of the policy have been covered and all support's been given, but also to give members reassurance that that's been complied with the council. We've extended the remit of that group, and just as Councillor Cogley says, so we had been doing some work previously when I only had one person in the team, Lorna, who had went into F&PM to support them and looking about the consistency of the training, the development in difficult cases. We have now brought forward a scrutiny element of that, where the head of service each month will come to, one head of service will come to each independent review panel with their senior management team. There's a deep dive into their statistics. There's a deep dive into their absence reviews that are being carried out, the quality of the absence reviews, the follow-up meetings, the occupational health, the training and the support. And there's also the opportunity for the services then to tell us the bits that they're struggling with, so that we know that we're targeting the support to them in the right areas. And Andrew's team was the first team that was up last few weeks ago. So really positive feedback for that, for both sides, for my own side, but also for Andrew's side. So that's something else that we're taking forward. We still need to get into the musculoskeletal side of stuff, but we were letting the new provider bed in the first instance, and then we're going to do a deep dive about how we do all that. And finally, the age profile. So obviously with the further funding for the jobs and training, that greatly helps us to support that. And additional apprentices. We've also been doing a lot of work. So the apprenticeship framework was at Cabinet a few months ago, and we've been doing a lot of work in career pathways, so that it's not just about apprenticeship. Not all of them will get a job in the council, but it's about making sure there's clear pathways in the council to take forward. We've got succession planning is very high up our workforce planning agenda, and that's where we're looking at bringing the apprentices in and how we can get them. When the older workforce are ready to move on, then we've got folk ready, qualified and experienced to take their place. So work in progress, but we're getting there.
Thank you very much, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley, for the question, and Amanda for the reply. Councillor Sangster, were you wanting in on this one?
Yeah, I think you've probably answered most of what I was actually going to ask, because you know it's a wee bit concerning when you see that within the top 5 reasons for absence, you've got personal stress and you've got work-related stress. And I think we can all agree that it's very important for anybody in employment to have a good work-life balance. I think that's really, really important. You know, around things like personal stress, you were talking about early intervention. Are you able to just give us a wee bit more detail of how that would work? Because, you know, is it a case of around things like personal stress, can somebody go to their manager and say, I'm having some serious difficulties within my personal life, and are they given, you know, an opportunity, you know, to get either time off or you know, some sort of flexible working, if you like, around that? Because one of the examples is, you know, it's been touched upon about early learning and how a lot of, we've got, you know, some absences there, and early learning centres are having to reduce, you know, pupils going. So therefore, that family might have to take time off their work because they have no other childcare, you know, and that's just an example within that. So I'm just wondering if you could maybe just kind of go a wee bit more in depth into the early intervention and how that works. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. So the early intervention part that I described is the new process when somebody does go off, but the team is also there if a manager's needing additional support when they're there. So we have had early intervention in place for a number of years. We moved away from the stress risk assessment last year to the workplace assessment action plan, which puts more of the onus on the employee with the support of their manager. And the hope is that if somebody was coming forward and saying that they were having issues or that then together they would fill that in to see what support was appropriate. We also obviously have our employee counselling, which we've got on VivUp on the platform, so that can be live chat, it can be telephone, or it can be face-to-face, and it's available 24/7, 365 days a year. For some more particular cases, where there's been a tragic bereavement or something else, we've got Beautiful Inside and Out as well that we can contact. The action plan then should be a personal thing that then details what course of actions needed and what support. So we have, as you can see with the absence figures, a high level of stress. So we are trying to decrease that, but the other part of the team is doing the proactive stuff to try and keep folk at work as well. But we've got a number of measures and I'm happy to share them with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sangster and Amanda, for the reply. I'm also thinking on the same subject that sometimes the reason for the absence can change. Like, so someone's got a bereavement and then they're not absent just for the bereavement, it then becomes depression or other problems, so they're then absent for a different reason and it's recorded differently. So that happens as well. Thank you, Amanda. We'll go to Councillor Cannon. You want in on this?
Thanks, Amanda, for the report. There's a couple of things that, in terms of the other leavers, it mentions that there's 2 dismissed through ill health, which obviously is a concern. I mean, how does that, is that just purely a time limit, or how does that get managed? You know, because I can imagine that's quite difficult to dismiss someone for ill health. And the second question was, it was just something Councillor McFadden mentioned at a previous council quite recently in terms of the preventative side, encouraging people to go for the well person. It's often referred to as a well man, but I mean the well person visit to your, and are we doing anything to incentivise people to do that? Because it's a very easy, you know, cost-effective way of getting people to sort of look after themselves a bit better and maybe prevent some of the absences. Thanks.
Through you, Chair. So in relation to the first with dismissals, sorry, can I just, I missed that wee bit. Is that in relation to ill health retirement? Right, so dismissals for ill health come in two categories. The first one's ill health retirement, where the person is in the pension fund, and through whatever condition or the length that they've had it, they've been assessed by an occupational health and a pension fund doctor that they're no longer able to continue in their current role or no longer able to work, or it's not perceived that they would be able to work to normal retirement age. And that's where the ill health retirement comes in. They then get access to their pension, which comes in two tiers. If it's not able to work until normal retirement age in any job, then it's tier 1 and they get added years onto their pension up to their normal retirement age. So if they're 55, they get added years up to 67 as if they've still worked with their pension. And then there's tier 2, that they're not fit to continue in the job that they're currently doing, but there's a prognosis that they're likely to work before the normal retirement age, and that's a maximum of an added years up to 6 2/3. Ill health retirement and the grounds of dismissal in the capability for ill health is where they do not meet the criteria for the pension fund. But I think you could see from the number that's been dismissed and the fact that we've not had any appeals against dismissal, most times that comes to a mutual agreement between the employees and the managers that they know they can't continue in the work, so then they are dismissed in what's classed as the grounds of capability through ill health, and they're paid their 12 weeks notice and any outstanding annual leave. But as I say, occasionally you will get to the point with that where an individual doesn't necessarily agree, but normally when we get to that point, and given that the 13 employees didn't appeal that, you can see that it's in a mutual agreement.
Thanks. I suppose it's the term dismissed, but so if it's agreed, it's not really. But so there aren't any real, well, from what you're saying, there isn't really any dismissals because it wasn't appealed. Yeah.
So it is dismissals in the terms of employment law and legislation, but it's not through a disciplinary process. And so the second question you had asked, Councillor Cannon, was about the wellbeing persons. So yes, we do repeatedly signpost to all these activities that we've got, and we've got monthly newsletters that go out, and we're also looking at further communication strategy. It's a difficult kind of catch-21, so there's fine for individuals that are off and doing that on a one-to-one basis, but some folk feel their mailboxes get flooded with the amount of emails, so it's that balance that you get the information out there and folk are going to take cognizance of it rather than just delete it's another email.
Because we do have a physiotherapist, don't we, employed by the council to do physiotherapy. I mean, could we have a facility where we actually bring in to do the wellness check? You know, I had in a previous employer that happened. People, it's around heart stuff, but they actually brought the people in to do the specialists in to do the work. So they bring a clinic in here, and then groups of people would go and do it over a day or two or whatever. Is that something that?
So part of our contract with occupational health with PALMS does include a physiotherapist, and we've got that, and there's people can self-refer or refer through management for that. With relation to what you're describing there, we do obviously have the element of community benefit within our contract with our occupational health provider, and there has been on occasions where we will bring them in to do extra pieces of work like that. So we've had them coming in to do toolbox talks for winter bird and maybe the menopause or men's health or women's health, things like that. So that is how we would approach it through that avenue.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Canning and Amanda, for the reply. The last part of East Ayrshire Performs, we're moving on to the health and safety. It's David Don.
Thanks, Chair, and it's still morning, so good morning, members. If I could just, the Health and Safety Performance Report before members covers period 7 to 9. And if I could just begin by drawing members' attention to the top of page 55, the summary report will be noted that there were 667 non-reportable incidents that have come through to the health and safety team, and that's a reduction of 44 incidents compared to the last report, while incidents which are reportable to HSE has increased slightly by 4 incidents. Over the reporting period, the decrease in non-reportable incidents, which can be seen at the bottom of page 56, is mainly due to a decrease in the number of incidents of violence and aggression within educational establishments, which have gone down by 80 incidents when you compare that to the same period last year, while the number of incidents of violence and aggression reported in non-educational establishments has remained static. I'm pleased to say, Chair, that this is the third report that I brought where we've seen modest reductions in violence and aggression within educational establishments in line to previous reports before that, which showed increases. It's still a bit early yet to determine whether this is going to continue, but we continue to monitor that. All I would say at this stage is it's a positive development that we've now went three reports now where we are seeing reductions rather than increases. If I could move again to the bottom of page 56, you'll note that the number of days to report an incident to health and safety has increased slightly from 3.3 days to 4.5 days, but that still remains within the 5-day target. Set in page 17, of the covering report, in order to ensure safety compliance across the Council's higher risk activities, there are a total of 878 recorded unannounced inspections carried out over the reporting period. An outcome of these inspections and the details of actions taken to address any safety deficiencies identified are reported to senior management on a monthly basis. That concludes the health and safety report, Chair, and I'll be happy to take any questions.
Thank you, David. Any questions? We're looking at page 55 and 56 of David's report. Any questions or comments? Councillor Canning.
More comment in terms of the in schools, was that one of the topics that I think that was one of the topics we agreed to do a deep dive on, and just have any preparations been done for that? And just an update on that, thanks.
Yeah, it was brought up in was it personal development or something? We were talking about training.
Yeah.
It was one of the suggestions that we have a closer look at this.
I think it was a deep, worth refreshing those, because I think there was a couple of deep dives which are different from a couple of training sessions. I can't remember which it fell into, but an update on that would be helpful.
We mentioned financial training, and we mentioned the link between IJB, Health and Social Care Partnership, NHS and the Council, how that all develops. And we also were focusing on violence and aggression in schools and how the council deals with it. So we've got like 3 training issues that we want to develop and look at.
Update where we are with planning for that.
Thank you.
No, not today, just if you could circulate that after the meeting. Yeah.
We will, we will, once we'll get that training all sorted out. And we'll invite all councillors to that training, not just the GNS. It will be valuable for every elected member. David.
Peter, procurement was another one. Again, just through parent councils, not just one primary school, but all the primary schools seem to have an issue with parents especially, but things are costing through procurement. Where parent councils are raising cash to buy stuff. And then things like they purchase sports equipment because the parent council can get it cheaper than the primary school can.
Chair, through you, sorry, the council procures using council resources. The council shouldn't be spending parent council funds through council procurement processes.
Yeah, it was a situation where sports equipment, basketball hoops, David, were bought by the parent council, but the basketball hoops have to be attached to a wall, and the school then went through the standard procurement process, but the parent council knew of a couple of local tradesmen who could have done the job much cheaper. So it's that type of stuff.
Sorry, through you, Chair, procurement wasn't an issue that was brought up in terms of either the governance scrutiny training or the scrutiny review topics. The committee agreed to take forward a programme of training and the programme of scrutiny review topics. There was 2 relevant to education, and the third one was relevant to Amanda's new group that are looking at the stress-related illnesses, which is both coming back. But we will bring back a timescale for those. But the procurement was not included, and it was not agreed as a topic to take forward in either the training or for a scrutiny review topic.
Councillor Sangster.
Thank you, Chair. Just around the violence and aggression in schools, that's obviously a bit of a concern. I mean, can you imagine going to work and getting, assaulted by a pupil? I'm just wondering, is there guidelines in terms of the consequences for any pupil who does, if there's any kind of violence and aggression that has taken place within a classroom or within a school establishment? I'm just wondering what the kind of guidelines are for suspension, exclusion, that sort of going down that kind of thing. Thank you.
I'll bring in Linda for education.
Yeah, I think myself and Mr Doran will probably tag team this one, Councillor Sangster, if that's okay. So straight away, Councillor Sangster, I think the report today is actually bringing a decrease in the violence and aggression incidents. Clearly they're still happening, but clearly, as David's already reported, we're seeing a 3-period decrease now, which is really, really encouraging, which we suspect is down to the continued implementation of the relationships policy, and clearly work around about greater training and understanding around the much increasing neurodiverse landscape as well. So we're clearly really happy that we're seeing a decrease there, but obviously not really happy that takes place. And clearly what you're also seeing in the report, Councillor Sangster, and this is not a deflection, is actually an increase in the other worlds in regards to that violence and aggression outside of educational establishments. So to come to your question, we are very clear. So we have a SHE system, which staff must, and it's very much a must, report any incidents of violence and aggression, but also please also bear in mind that the incidents of violence and aggressions in school also contain child against child. So in those figures, it's not all parts of young person and teacher. It is also any incidents of violence recorded as that, and it also does contain incidents of violence from parents on school staff, Councillor Sangster, that I need to say sadly are also on the increase. So and that can be verbal as well as physical. So I'm getting it right so far because David's nodding at me. Ultimately, Councillor Sangster, the reports are put in by individual staff via format. They're recorded by the school on our SHE system. We work with health and safety colleagues through the SHE system to understand any phenomena that might be playing out, particular schools or particular days, particular patterns, and clearly we can then design our training around about what we see or specific interventions around a specific school even at that level. To move that through, and I know David will pick up more around the SHE system itself, but to move that through to exclusions and suspensions, etc. So the schools are all governed by Standard Circular 8. So they all work to the same protocols in that regard. So again, they use, so it's the head teacher. Clearly, if it's a young person that's looked after, they actually have to come to me for permission to exclude. So that's very much to make sure that a young person's difficulties are not further compounded potentially by a school sending out messages that they don't belong there, when that might have already been the case in a home circumstance. So I hope that covers all the aspects of the questions, but I'll maybe open up slightly through you, Chair, for David to come in that regard, if that's okay.
Thanks, Chair, through you and thanks for the question, Councillor Sangster. I think just on SHE very briefly, all the SHE reports that come through to us are checked by my advisor team, and any actions arising, if we are noticing that there's trends or there are any issues there, then we would raise that with the head teacher around what control measures that they have in place. So we would work alongside the school to see what is in place and how effective that is. As you can see, 77% of the incidents that are reported in this report are violence and aggression related. That's kind of par for the course in these reports, always around the 70% mark. And the complaint that we tend to get from our trade union colleagues is underreporting. I don't see that as being an issue in this council. I think as council and our educational establishments are very good at reporting incidents. Now, I'm not saying it's 100%, but the figures would suggest that that's not an issue here. Just again, briefly, to very quickly expand on the work we're doing around violence and aggression in schools. I've been meeting with our trade union colleagues and also meeting with colleagues in education around the relationships policy that Linda has mentioned there. That at this point applies to primary schools and ESN establishments at this stage, and they are by far the greatest number of incidents that we see coming through. Now, that's built round effectively triaging cases, because what they tend to be is a very small cohort of young people who are dysregulated that effectively drive these figures. So by focusing in on those young people through the tracking aspect, recording the behaviours and recording the actions that are taken, and then assessing what supports are in place, I think that this is having a positive effect on these figures, and I think that's why you're seeing the reductions. But I'm being cautious about sitting here in front of elected members and actually saying that that is the absolute driver behind this. What I will say is that work is taking place. It's going on behind the scenes. We are in consultation with trade union colleagues around it. I think it's very positive, and I think it is making a difference. But it's just too early at this stage to say whether that will be continued on, because the reductions are modest at the end of the day. I hope that answers the question, Chair.
Thank you, David, for that reply.
Yeah, no, thank you very much. And it was really good to get clarification on the actual figures themselves. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
David, can I ask, reporting these figures, is I take it we're capturing everything that happens inside the school boundaries. But for a couple of teenagers decide outside school gates, I want to go at you, and then they're having a fight outside the school gates, is that also, that wouldn't be reported, that would be missed in your stats?
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily be reported, Chair, and I think there's a big debate about incidents between pupil and pupil as to whether that's relevant to a SHE report. And we're also working with colleagues in education to determine what should go in SHE and what shouldn't go in SHE. So just to be clear about the purpose of SHE, the purpose of SHE is a workplace reporting system to allow me, as the responsible person for the council, to notify HSE of any incidents which become reportable to them. This also allows us, obviously, to capture stats to allow us to prepare reports such as this one in front of members today. But that's its primary purpose. So incidents between pupils wouldn't necessarily be relevant to being reported on SHE. However, schools do report it, and I'm quite happy to accept them. And we would present that in the report along with all the other statistics.
No, really just to corroborate that which David has stated in that particular space around about clearly the part, and the other bit, I suppose, for member reassurance, where something occurs outside, we do have the function of the police report that comes through to myself and other senior officers, so that can often indicate something potentially brewing or an isolated incident, for example. So we do get the police report through at that particular point, but no, as David would say, that's very much a workplace tool, but we do have other aspects of monitoring that are available to us for the outside issues.
Thank you for that. Councillor Canning.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, David and Linda. I'm always reluctant to add more and more work and information, too much information in the report, because obviously we can ask officers outside of this and some detailed questions. But I mean, would it be helpful to have just another, in terms of the number of individuals actually involved in these incidents? Because obviously, as you're describing that, you know, that information I think would be helpful to understand the trends a wee bit better, because the trends could look, you know, either way.
So that there's a really easy rule around about that one. So generally, in a lot of the narrative that we do supply in these reports, we do make reference to the fact that this can be repeated incidents. What we have to be careful of, Councillor Cannon, is that the data becomes so small that the individual could become identifiable, and that would present us with a problem in that particular regard. So ultimately, we do tend to have narrative around about you know, certain numbers of young people at a very high level, which is why the report is presented in the manner that it is. I don't know if David wants to come back in, but I hope that answers the question. We just need to be really careful that we don't end up in a position. It's kind of like compressed exam results, whereby something by default would expose a young person and indeed the difficulties that are having, which wouldn't be appropriate in public session.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Councillor Cannon, for the question. We'll wrap up this part of it now, which was East Ayrshire Performance Report. I thank all the officers that have been in reporting that. You'll notice back on page 13 of your reports, elected members, the recommendations were to Cabinet to note the reports. Page 14 is for us. And at the top of page 14, it's recommended members, not the contents of the report. Are we all happy with that, members? That's accepted. Thank you very much. Thank you. And now I've got a bit of a quandary because we've been going for 2 hours, 14 minutes, and I'm wondering if perhaps we need a break. And at the same time, I've got housing officers and audit people here who are patiently waiting to deliver their reports. So how do you feel about either taking a break or continuing? You want to continue? Everyone okay as far as a comfort break?
Chair, if it assists, I mean, obviously number 5 could go anywhere in terms of members' interest in that item, the tenant satisfaction, but the other two, one's just really for noting because it's simply confirming Cabinet approved the extension of the corporate fraud arrangements, so that decision's been taken and implemented. It's just for this committee's interest in the fraud arrangements. And the last one, the Warner contracts, isn't very long, so it's just to help inform that. But if members want a short break before they get into the housing one, then and the other's fine, but the last two won't take particularly long.
Chair, if I could also, there's other council business happening in the chamber at 1 o'clock, being the Children at Risk of Harm inspection feedback from the Care Inspectorate, just to note that position. Thank you.
That just about decides it then. There's other people wanting in the chamber, we better press on. So we'll not be having a break. What's next in the agenda? Item 5 on the agenda, annual report, Scottish Social Housing Charter. And we're going to Helen Merriman, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. The purpose of the report is to provide an update to the Governance and Scrutiny Committee on the annual return on the Scottish Social Housing Charter, submitted to the Scottish Housing Regulator in May 2024. The annual performance report to tenants published in October 2024 and the tenant satisfaction survey of November 2023. Recommendations are noted at paragraph 2 of the report. The background and the outcomes and themes within the Charter are stated at paragraphs 3 and 4. Paragraphs 5 to 8 discuss the responsibility of Scottish social landlords to meet the Charter outcomes and standards, and that to monitor landlords' achievement of the outcomes and standards, the regulator requires landlords to complete an annual return in the Charter by May each year and carry out a large-scale tenant satisfaction survey at least every 3 years. Paragraphs 9 to 11 set out the timeline for submission of the Council's annual return in the Charter and the consultation and collaboration with representatives from the East Ayrshire Federation of Tenants and Residents and tenant representatives prior to its submission to the regulator in May 24. In September 24, the regulator published landlord reports for all social landlords, which provide information on 15 key indicators benchmarked against the Scottish average performance. Paragraphs 12 to 22 describe the key service areas and satisfaction indicators which were identified by tenants as being the information they wanted included in the annual performance report to tenants. And the Federation and Tenants and Residents groups agreed the satisfaction indicators which should provide them with the required information so as to assess the effectiveness of East Ayrshire Council as a landlord. During 23, Housing Services commissioned an independent market research company to undertake a tenant satisfaction survey on behalf of the Council, and this work concluded in November 2023 with the relevant satisfaction indicators pertaining to the survey forming part of the annual return to the regulator in May last year. The findings of the survey overall were positive in relation to satisfaction with service delivery, with 90.3% very or fairly satisfied overall. Members will note the Council's performance against each satisfaction indicator from 2018-19 through to 2023-24, which overall is above the Scottish local authority average. 2 indicators have reduced since the last large-scale survey, with significant increases in 3 indicators. A revised action plan will review the tenant satisfaction survey and take account of areas where performance has decreased. Of the 17 indicators included in the annual report to tenants, 11 have remained the same or improved in performance. The Council continues to work in partnership with the Federation and all interested tenants through the consultation forums to increase participation and engagement with housing services. Paragraphs 23 and 24 discuss performance in the housing quality and maintenance indicators. The indicators show an improvement in performance and perform better than the Scottish Local Authority average across the same period. The indicators relating to neighbourhood and community, access to housing and support, and getting good value from rents and service charges are set out in paragraphs 25 through to 35. You will note the Council's performance in Indicator 15 of 94.9% in 23-24 is above the Scottish Local Authority average of 90.9% in meeting antisocial behaviour case management targets and when compared with the previous year. Performance at Indicator 17, which is the percentage of lettable houses that became vacant in the last year, has increased slightly to 9%. However, is significantly lower than the 2018-19 figure of 11.6%. Within Indicator 22, there has been a continued reduction in the number of core actions raised. The rent collected and gross rent arrears, both as a percentage of total rent due, have improved, and performance in relation to void rent loss is favourable when compared to the Scottish average. Paragraphs 36 to 38 discuss the annual performance report to tenants, which was issued last October and meets the regulator requirements. Paragraphs 39 to 46 set out the methodology and results of the tenant satisfaction survey. A total of 1,200 interviews were carried out with East Ayrshire Council tenants between the 9th of October 2023 and the 4th of December 2023. 10 interviews were spread across each area of the Council's housing stock to ensure coverage of all stock types, and this figure of 1,200 interviews is well within the recommended level of error proposed by the regulator. The aim of the research was to seek tenants' views on the services that housing and communities provide, how these services perform, and to help identify any areas of improvement. The research sought customer views on the quality of information provided by the Council, customer care, quality of accommodation in the neighbourhood, service provision including repairs, maintenance and improvements, tenant involvement and opportunities for tenant participation, and value for money. The survey took account of tenants from all characteristics and households to include age, working status and household, and key results include 98.8% of tenants were very or fairly satisfied at being kept informed about council services and decisions, and this is an increase of 8.2% from the 2020 survey. 98.1% of tenants were very or fairly satisfied with the opportunities to participate in housing services decisions, and this has increased significantly by 21.8% when compared with the previous survey. 93.3% of tenants were very or fairly satisfied with the Council's management of the neighbourhood they live in, and this has increased by 8.4% when compared to the previous survey. 90.3% of tenants are very or fairly satisfied with the overall service of the Council, and this has decreased slightly from the previous survey, where the figure was 91.9%, but it remains above the Scottish Local Authority average of 83.2%. Most tenants, at 88%, rate rent value for money very or fairly satisfied as good in the survey, and this is above the response in the 2020 survey, which was 84.6%. 89.3% of tenants are satisfied with the repair service, and this is an increase from the previous survey, where the figure was 88.4%. There was a slight decrease in tenant satisfaction of housing quality, which was 86.2% compared to 87.4% in 2020. However, again, it remains above the Scottish local authority average of 81.8%. The tenant satisfaction survey results are very positive for housing and communities, and the majority of indicators have seen an improvement or remained consistent with the previous survey. The report goes on to say that the preparation and submission of the annual return in the Charter and annual performance report to tenants support the Scottish Government's Housing to 2040 vision and the guiding principles of the East Ayrshire Community Plan and delivery plans and the Council's strategic plan. Both the annual return in the Charter and the annual performance report to tenants meet the requirements of the Scottish Housing Regulators Framework as set out in the Housing Scotland Act of 2010. There are no human resource implications and there are no negative impacts on equality groups. There are also no direct financial implications, with all expenditure in relation to the production and the distribution of the annual report to tenants met from current budgets. To conclude, the annual return in the Charter, annual performance report to tenants and the tenant satisfaction survey meet the requirements of the Scottish Housing Regulator, and the performance information contained in the report shows a positive trend, with the majority of indicators showing improvement or that the Council is operating at a similar level to previous years. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for presenting that report. Any questions or comments? Councillor Cogley.
Thank you, Helen, very much for that. I think I'm getting a bit of a deja vu on this one. Have we had this report previously, and this is the updated version of it?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Cogley. It's an annual update on the annual return to the Scottish Social Housing Charter, so that you receive that every year. It's also an update on the annual performance report to tenants. The tenant satisfaction survey is new for the 2023 survey, with the last large-scale survey in 2020. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen, for that answer. Anyone else? No one online. I mean, the statistics are good performance. I'm trying to work my computer and I'm pressing the button for the mic. I'm getting addled. Page 97, 98 is the indicators with lots of green arrows showing that we're improving performance. And there's only one or two that are red arrows showing that performance has dropped a wee bit. Page 105 would confirm what we're seeing, probably most of us as councillors dealing with casework. There's paragraphs about tenants' concerns, car parking, dog fouling, rubbish and litter, drug abuse, and further down about antisocial behaviour, just 35 individuals reporting antisocial behaviour, and some don't report because they fear reprisals or they don't think anything would be done about it. I know that you as housing officers take antisocial behaviour very seriously, and you've got a very good team that step up and do their best to try and help residents. But for me, that page 105 confirms that this is the work we're doing at the front line as elected members. We get quite a bit of this as casework that we bring to you. I want to thank you and your team for all the help you do, helping us deal with all that casework. It's valuable getting a reply from officers who know exactly what they're doing and how to deal with it. Any other questions or comments from elected members? Councillor Todd.
Thanks, convener. Great report, and it's good that there seems to be a rise for all the indicators that are important. It's in terms of what Peter was talking about, antisocial behaviour. Do you get much interaction with the other housing providers? I know that especially Atrium's got antisocial behaviour officers, but the complaints that we get are a lot. It's from every housing provider that councillors get, and some are maybe not as quick to come to the fore as maybe we would accept. Now, with the investment that the council's put into hopefully making things better in our communities, would they come along and help to have that super team, if you like, where there would be officers from the other social housing providers working as a team, or do you think there's any avenue there for that?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Todd. So there is no current existing network across housing providers. However, in the spirit of partnership, as we would always do business in East Ayrshire, it would be something I would welcome, and I'll take that away as an action that I'll refer to my colleague Craig Ferguson, our anti-social behaviour manager, to see what opportunities and what shared and joint working could look like in that respect. Thank you.
Thank you, Blair, and thank you, Councillor Todd, for the question. If there's no other questions, we'll move on to the next item on the agenda. That's item 6, corporate fraud team.
Oh.
Sorry?
Just need to agree the recommendations for that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. You're right. And the recommendations are on page, I believe they're just for noting. We're getting there.
83, Chair.
Page 83. We're not in the contents of the report and the update. Agreed?
Yep.
Thank you. Right, my mistake. Thank you, David. Keeping me right. And the next item is item 6 in the agenda, corporate fraud team. Further extension of shared service agreements. And is it Ailey or Paul we're going to Ailey Mackay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll give you a 101 tour because this obviously is not a report of the performance of the corporate fraud team. It's just to advise members that Cabinet have approved a further 3-year extension of the arrangement with North Ayrshire Council. And that extension, as you can see from the paper, was based on the performance to date, which has landed generally well at the GNS committee. So I'll just mention 2 paragraphs in the report, Chair. Paragraph 17 summarises the benefits of the shared corporate fraud team, which I know the members are well aware of, and we go over that in a lot more detail at the mid-year and the annual reports, and quite often we're joined by the corporate fraud team from North Ayrshire Council. And, you know, really the corporate fraud team, we should always be aiming for a focus on prevention rather than detection. We want to stop them. We don't want to find them. We want to stop them doing anything. And that largely is what the evidence is showing us. I always say, be careful what you wish for. We don't want huge recoveries by the corporate fraud work. And I think the other thing to point out is that in your corporate risk register, which you considered as part of East Ayrshire Performs, at risk 6, which is the fraud risk, that just reinforces how the corporate fraud team is part of our anti-fraud jigsaw as a council, but we've all got a part to play in it. And actually, I thought it might be useful to just give you a very quick example of where it can go wrong, because you've probably all seen this. So the press has covered in the last few weeks the money lost by Leeds City Council in their COVID business grants, where a fraudster who happens to live in Paisley Road West in Glasgow has been convicted of taking £710,000 fraudulently from the COVID grants in Leeds City Council. You know that we had as a council, we had very strong, and again that's referred to in the corporate risk register, very strong arrangements as a council around the corporate fraud grants, as we do for other areas in the council. But I thought it was a good example. We have double checked. We don't know the bank accounts he was using, but we've double checked. We have never paid to a person with that name, and we're pretty confident. In fact, we're very confident that there would be no payments made to him, but we're just double checking with the police at the moment to see if we can get the actual bank accounts the man used. But actually, he was able to perpetrate that fraud, and why I'm very confident that we don't have a problem here is he phoned up Leeds City Council and said, I work for Greg's. Please give me the NDA, the non-domestic rates references for all Greg's properties. And they gave them to him. Now, we wouldn't do that in this council. What we do, as you probably know, is if somebody phoned or emailed and said, oh, hello, can I have all these non-domestic rates references? What our colleagues in finance do is simply reissue the non-domestic rates bill to the known address. So that stops this kind of nonsense. So prevention is what we're all about, and it's always been what we've been about as a council. The corporate fraud team findings reflect that. that, and the work that external audit do reflects that, the work that we do in internal audit reflects that. We always find areas for continuous improvement, but we very rarely find serious levels of fraud and error. So I know this was part of there was a small conversation around this at the budget setting process as well. So I thought it was useful just to remind ourselves about the wider function of the corporate fraud team. They sit in with our prevention rather than necessarily investigating the frauds that are detected. So that has generally worked well. But the other paragraph that I'm going to highlight too is paragraph 19, because we all need to be minded to the affordability. So we've put a cap on what we will pay going forward to North Ayrshire Council, and that is actually significantly less than we've paid in some previous years. But they didn't fall off their seat when I had a meeting with them and spoke to them about how much the future cap would be. They're working around that. They're also minded about their affordability at North Ayrshire Council. In the cabinet paper, Joe was very supportive that if we require additional services, that will be considered at that point in time in terms of the best value for this council. So it's a cap in terms of day-to-day operations, but we may want to. The most that we've spent so far in any year has been 120,000. The current revenue budget is the 90,000, and I've funded it out of underspend and internal audit, and that's not sustainable going forward. But we'll still get a good level of service for that money, and we're rewriting the legal agreement with our colleagues and David's services to make sure we just squeeze as much out of that service as we normally do for the amount we're paying. So I think it's the right decision to continue for 3 years, and we anticipate that we'll continue to bring reports of assurance to this committee going forward. So happy to take questions as always. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you, Ailey, for presenting your report. It's very good what the corporate fraud team are doing. We can see it in Appendix 2, page 124, the positive results that you get.
Very much around that prevention, Chair, and I should have mentioned the extensive work that the corporate fraud team do with Blair's service, and Blair has provided testimonials in the past for the annual report for the corporate fraud team, and a lot of that's preventative work. For example, one of Appendix 2 contains the example of the succession house and tenancies in the last few years. 5 fraudulent applications have been stopped, meaning that the tenancies have gone to the right people in the house on the list, and that's invaluable. Well, actually, the Cabinet Office put a price on that, and that price is 70 grand. If you manage to protect a tenancy for the council, it's worth 70 grand. So that alone's what, 350, trying to do my mental arithmetic, £350,000 on that. So we don't use those nominal allocations here because I think they're a wee bit misleading. But that's what Cabinet Office put on that for recoveries elsewhere. So it's just, I think it's useful to look at that in the bigger picture. Sorry, I said I was going to be brief. I will be quiet now.
We'll open up to any questions for Ailey. I'm glad to see that you're still working with North Ayrshire. It's been working well for the last few years, and there's the thinking as well. If it ain't broke, don't try and fix it and do something different. If you've got a good system, keep it going. Any questions in the room? Councillor Cogley.
Yeah, thank you to the collaborative working, and I think it is one of those things where it is very, very difficult to put a figure on what we actually potentially save. So yeah, well done and carry on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cogley. So no other questions in the room or online? Okay, we're moving on now. Thank you, Ailey. We'll go
at page 117, Chair.
the recommendations for this report. Again, we're noting the contents of the report. I'm not going to redo all these recommendations. Page 117 and paragraph 2. There's quite a few, but they're all about noting the contents of the report. Happy with that, elected members?
Yep.
Thank you. And thank you, Lynn, again, keeping me right. We'll move on to the last item on the agenda, which is item 7, awarding of contracts. We'll go to David Mitchell for that report, page 125.
Thanks, Chair. Members. As members are aware, this is one of a regular suite of papers that we bring to governance and scrutiny as part of the overall desire to deliver transparency and accountability in how the council disburses all of the public funds that we spend each year. The point being that what we report here is the contracts we award, so folk can see how we go about managing tendering, how we evaluate tenders, who gets to tender, who gets awarded contracts, and who's unsuccessful, and as I say, the reasons for that. It also gives a fair flavour of the range and width and depth of the wide range of services the council provides and the wide range of contracts we need to put in place to meet all those needs. If there's any particular questions in any of them, I'm happy to take them or try and answer them or take them away and provide any further information or clarification, but really they are just there for noting. And I'm conscious we've got a time constraint and not to prolong things, but it occurs that, going back to the point raised by Councillor Richardson in an earlier paper, that perhaps a better approach would have been for the council to grant the parent council licence to install their basketball hoop on our wall at their cost, and that could have been avoided, but I wasn't aware of that one till this morning. But we can look at how that can be avoided in the future, because there was maybe a different way of doing that that didn't require them to spend money through council contracts, which I'm not actually sure of. So there's always a different way to skin a cat, but in terms of this paper, I simply present it for members' noting and scrutiny and any questions that may arise.
Thank you, David. Any questions in the room? Or online? No questions. We'll go back to the recommendations is simply to note the contents of the report, and that's in page 125, recommendation 2. I'll be happy to note the contents.
Yes.
Thank you, elected members. If you need any information, you can email David. He'll give you some detail if you want it. And that concludes the agenda for the meeting this evening, this afternoon. Thank you for your attendance.
It was like evening.